You ever see Jeepers Creepers? The old one. If you have, good. If you haven't, don't worry, it'll make sense later. Anyway, my name is Andre Williams, and I've worked the night shift at Hoover Dam for almost 9 years. Honestly, it's a pretty good job. The pay's great, the benefits are solid, most nights are quiet. That's why I took it. Before this, I'd worked security in warehouses, office buildings, and a natural gas plant outside Las Vegas. Nothing exciting. Just 12-hour shifts, a flashlight, a radio, and enough coffee to stay awake until sunrise. When the opening at Hoover Dam popped up online, I applied the same day. A week later, they called me. Another week after that, I was standing on top of one of the most famous structures in America. Most people think Hoover Dam is just a giant wall holding back Lake Mead. It isn't. It's basically a small city built inside concrete. There are miles of tunnels running through the dam, generator rooms bigger than basketball courts, maintenance passages that seem to go on forever, elevators, stairwells, control rooms, pump rooms, catwalks hanging hundreds of feet above spinning turbines. You could work here for years and still never see every part of it. During the day, the place is packed. Tour buses, families, school field trips, people taking selfies. You'd never believe how many tourists try climbing over railings just to get a better picture. Every now and then, somebody drops a phone over the edge. Sometimes a hat. One guy somehow managed to drop both. By 6 o'clock every evening, though, almost all of them are gone. The gates close, the tour elevators stop running, the gift shop shuts down, and the dam becomes quiet. Not silent. A place like Hoover Dam is never silent. You can always hear the generators humming somewhere below your feet. You can hear water moving through pipes bigger than houses. You can hear ventilation fans pushing air through tunnels carved into the concrete almost 90 years ago. After a while, you stop noticing those sounds. They just kind of become part of the job. There are usually only a few dozen of us working nights. Maintenance crews, engineers, electricians, security. Everyone pretty much knows everybody else. My shifts were simple enough. Walk the property, check secured doors, replace lights when maintenance needed an extra hand, inspect fences, respond if an alarm went off. Most nights, nothing happened. Honestly, I preferred it that way. If I wanted excitement, I would have become a cop or a firefighter. Instead, I got paid to walk around one of the biggest engineering projects ever built. Hard to complain. The first week was mostly training, generator safety, electrical hazards, heat exhaustion, emergency evacuation routes, what to do if someone fell into a restricted area. The instructors covered everything you'd expect, nothing more. Nobody mentioned hearing children. Nobody mentioned red water or balloons. If they had, I probably would have assumed they were messing with the new guy. Instead, my first real shift started at exactly 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night. My supervisor, Scott Jackson, met me inside the employee entrance with a flashlight in one hand and a ring of keys hanging from his belt. He looked at me for a second, and then he asked me the strangest question I've ever heard at a job. You ever see Jeepers Creepers? Rule 1. Never drink the water between midnight and 1 a.m. Scott didn't tell me the first rule on my first night, or my second. Honestly, he let me work for almost 2 weeks before he ever brought it up. By then, I'd settled into a routine. I'd clock in around 7, grab my radio, check the maintenance board to see if anything needed attention, then start my rounds. Most nights I'd spend a few hours walking the tunnels inside the dam, checking locked doors, replacing burned out lights, or escorting contractors into restricted areas. Around 10, I'd usually take my lunch in the employee break room before finishing the rest of my shift. It was easy work, quiet. Exactly what I wanted. The break room wasn't anything special. Few vending machines, a fridge that was probably older than I was, a microwave that sounded like it was about to explode every time somebody used it. There was also a sink and one of those bottle filling stations people always use nowadays. I probably filled my water bottle 3 or 4 times every shift. The water came straight from Lake Mead after being treated. It was cold and clean, tasted fine, at least during the day. The first time Scott mentioned the rule, it was completely out of nowhere. It was a little before midnight. We just finished helping maintenance replace a light fixture near one of the generator rooms. By the time we got back upstairs, I realized my water bottle was empty. I walked over to the bottle station. Scott cleared his throat behind me. "Don't." I looked back at him. "Don't what?" "Don't fill it." I laughed. "It's empty." "I know." "So?" He checked his watch. 11:58. Then he looked back at me. "Wait an hour." I stared at him for a second before laughing again. "Seriously?" He nodded. I figured he was messing with me. I shrugged and reached for the button anyway. Scott grabbed my wrist before I could press it. Not hard, just enough to stop me. "I'm not joking, Andre." Something in his voice made me stop smiling. He let go of my wrist and pointed at the clock on the wall. "Come back at 1. "Why?" "You'll see." Neither of us said another word. We sat down at one of the tables in the break room. Scott drank coffee, and I sat there wondering what kind of joke he was setting up. The clock slowly rolled over midnight. Nothing happened. I looked at Scott, and he didn't say anything. And about 30 seconds later, I heard it. We both looked toward the sink. A faucet that had been turned off all night had started dripping by itself. One drop, then another, then another. Scott stood up. We walked into the hallway. Every employee sink we passed was doing the same thing. Slow dripping. One of the electricians walked by carrying a toolbox. He didn't even look surprised. Just kept walking. When we reached the next water fountain, Scott nodded toward it. "Go ahead." I leaned down, and the water wasn't clear anymore. It was red, almost like rust, except it wasn't rust. The entire stream had changed color. I remember just standing there staring at it. "What the hell?" Scott interrupted me. "Don't drink it." We walked to another fountain. Same thing. Then another. Same thing again. We checked a sink inside one of the maintenance rooms. Red. Every faucet, fountain, bottle station, every pipe carrying drinking water through Hoover Dam. From exactly midnight until 1 in the morning, the water turned red. At exactly 1 o'clock, it went back to normal. Just like somebody had flipped a switch. Clear, cold, perfectly clean. I spent the next week trying to come up with a logical explanation. Maybe it was sediment. Maybe some strange mineral from Lake Mead. Maybe maintenance flushed the pipes every night. But none of those explanations made sense. If it were sediment, it wouldn't happen at the exact same minute every single night. If it were maintenance, somebody would have mentioned it. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. Everyone on the night shift already knew. They'd known for years. Scott finally told me where the rule came from. About 12 years ago, before I started working there, a new maintenance worker named Joel Bailey decided the older guys were full of it. He waited until 12:15, walked over to a fountain, filled an entire paper cup, then drank it while everyone watched. He smiled, held up the empty cup, and asked if that was all they had. Well, nothing happened then. Joel finished the rest of his shift and went home. The next day he called in sick. Scott said Joel told his supervisor he couldn't get the taste of blood out of his mouth. Didn't matter what he ate or drank. Everything tasted like blood. His doctor couldn't find anything wrong. Dentist couldn't find anything wrong. And a week later, Joel quit. Nobody at Hoover Dam ever saw him again. Now, maybe it was all in his head. Maybe there was another explanation. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that I've worked here for almost 9 years, and I have never taken a single drink of water between midnight and 1 o'clock. Not once. Rule 2. If you hear wings flying above you, go inside immediately. You ever see Jeepers Creepers? The old one? The guy in the trench coat, big hat, even bigger wings? I remember watching it years before I ever worked at Hoover Dam. I thought it was creepy, sure, but still just a movie. And then I started working nights here. The first time Scott Jackson brought it up, I laughed. "The movie?" I asked. Scott nodded. "Do you remember the wings?" "Yeah." "Good." That was all he said. He didn't explain what he meant. He just kept walking down the inspection tunnel like we'd been talking about the weather. I figured he was just another older guy trying to mess with a new employee. Every workplace has stories, you know? Construction workers have ghost stories. Truck drivers have haunted highways. Security guards swear abandoned buildings aren't really abandoned. I figured Hoover Dam was no different. I was wrong. The story everyone tells new hires starts with a man named Christian Black. Nobody agrees on exactly how old the story is anymore. Some guys say it happened in 2014. Others swear it was 2016. Scott always said the exact year, it didn't matter. The only part that matters, he'd tell people, is what happened after he looked up. Christian worked the night maintenance crew. From everything I heard, he was a good worker. Showed up early, never complained, never cut corners. Kind of guy everyone wanted on their shift. Well, one August night, he was assigned to inspect the warning lights that run across the top of the dam. Simple job, really. Walk the roadway, make sure every light is working, replace bulbs if needed, report any damage. You spend most of the shift completely alone. By that point, the tourists are gone, the traffic has stopped, even the wind usually dies down after midnight. It's surprisingly peaceful up there. Christian liked listening to music while he worked. Technically, you weren't supposed to wear earbuds during inspections. Too many safety risks. But people did it anyway. One earbud in, one ear open. That was usually enough. Security cameras followed most of his route across the dam. Scott showed me the footage during my first month. Not officially. He wasn't supposed to have a copy. He just told me to sit down in the security office after lunch one night. "I want you to see something." The video looked completely normal. Christian walked across the roadway with a flashlight in one hand and a clipboard tucked under one arm. Every few seconds, he'd stop beside another light, write something down, then keep moving. Nothing unusual, nothing scary, nothing that would have made anyone remember that night. But then Christian stopped walking. Not suddenly, almost like he'd heard something. He reached up, pulled one earbud out, tilted his head, listened. Scott paused the video. "What do you hear?" I shrugged. "Nothing." "Exactly." He pressed play again. Christian slowly looked up toward the night sky. Not straight up, just enough to follow something moving over him. The security camera flickered once, then again. The screen filled with static for maybe 3 seconds, and when the picture came back, Christian was gone. His flashlight was lying on the concrete. One white earbud rested a few feet away. That was it. No blood, no signs of a struggle, no damaged railing. Nothing. I remember staring at the monitor for a long time before finally speaking. "So, he fell?" I asked. Scott shook his head. No. Search team spent 3 days looking." I watched the last few seconds of the footage again. There wasn't enough time. Even if Christian had somehow climbed the barrier and jumped, he couldn't have disappeared that fast. Not in 3 seconds. I looked over at Scott. And then he said something that stuck with me. The report also leaves something out. There were 4 other workers on shift that night. They were all inside different parts of the dam, and they all reported hearing the same thing. I felt a knot form in my stomach. He looked toward the office window for a few seconds before speaking. Wings. Big ones. Now, nobody saw anything. By the time they reached where Christian stopped answering his radio, he was already gone. The official investigation blamed an accidental fall. Case closed. Scott told me nobody in the night crew believed that. Not a single one. After hearing the story, I started paying attention whenever I worked outside. Not because I believed all of it, because stories like that, they've got a way of getting into your head. Every owl suddenly sounded louder. Every gust of wind made me glance upward. Sometimes bats flew around the lights near the intake towers, and I'd catch myself watching them longer than I should. And then almost 3 years later, I heard it. I was walking back toward the employee entrance after checking a security gate on the Arizona side. It was around 2 a.m. Perfectly clear night. No wind or traffic, nothing, and then I stopped walking. Something else, slower this time. It didn't sound mechanical. It sounded alive. Huge. Like something with wings was moving through the darkness above me. I remember then exactly what Scott had said years earlier. If you ever hear wings, don't stop to figure out who they belong to. Don't look. Just get inside. For 1 second, I almost stopped and looked. Human curiosity, it's a funny thing. Part of me wanted to know, wanted proof. Wanted to see whatever had made Christian stop and look all those years before. Instead, I lowered my head, grabbed my radio, and I started running toward the nearest security door. The sound came once more, closer this time. Then it stopped. I slammed the steel door behind me so hard the windows rattled. The hallway was empty. Only the steady hum of the generators echoed through the concrete. Well, I stood there for almost a full minute trying to catch my breath. Scott happened to walk around the corner and carrying a toolbox, and one look at my face told him everything. You heard him. It wasn't a question. I nodded. He looked toward the closed door behind me, then back at me. You look up? I shook my head. No. And for the first time since I'd met him, Scott smiled. Good, he said quietly. That's why you're still here. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I believed I'd almost been carried off by some giant flying creature, because I didn't. At least not yet. I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe a large bird. Maybe some strange echo bouncing off the canyon walls. Every explanation sounded reasonable. At first. Scott never brought it up again. That was another thing about the night crew. Nobody liked talking about the rules once you learned them. It wasn't some secret club. It was more like everybody had already accepted there wasn't an answer. You learned the rule, you followed it, then you moved on. A few nights later, I asked one of the electricians if he'd ever heard the wings. He looked at me for a couple seconds before answering. Once. What'd you do? Exactly what Scott told you. Did you look? He shook his head no, and walked away. Over the next few years, I worked hundreds of night shifts on top of that dam. Sometimes I'd spend 3 or 4 hours outside. Summer or winter, didn't matter. I'd walk the same inspection routes Christian Black once had, check the same lights, unlock the same gates, sign the same inspection sheets. Every now and then, I'd catch myself looking up into the night sky. Not because I'd heard anything, just because I was thinking about him. Thinking about those 3 seconds. It's amazing how much your imagination can do with 3 missing seconds. Maybe he really did fall. Maybe the camera really did fail at exactly the wrong moment. Maybe everyone inside the dam imagined hearing wings because they'd already convinced themselves something strange had happened. All of those explanations, they are possible. They're also a lot easier to live with. Still, there's one thing I've never been able to explain. Every security camera on Hoover Dam stores its footage for years. Maintenance videos, traffic cameras, inspection recordings. Everything. Except not one. Christian's recording disappears right after the static. I've asked around more than once. The official answer is that the file was corrupted. Maybe it was. Or maybe someone decided nobody needed to keep watching those 3 seconds over and over again. I honestly don't know. What I do know is this. I've heard the wings once. Scott heard them twice. The electrician heard them once, and none of us looked. Christian Black did. And whether you believe the old stories or not, he is the only one who never came back. So if you're ever working the night shift at Hoover Dam, and everything suddenly goes quiet, and you hear something enormous beating the air above your head, don't try to figure out what it is. Don't convince yourself it's just a bird. Don't tell yourself you're being paranoid. Don't look up. Just run. Rule 3. Never stand too close to the edge. Now, not every rule at Hoover Dam exists because of something supernatural. Some of them exist because this place is dangerous enough all by itself. People forget how massive Hoover Dam really is. Pictures don't do it justice. Standing on top of it doesn't either. It's only when you walk the maintenance routes at night that your brain finally understands the scale of the place. The top of the dam sits more than 700 feet above the Colorado River. The concrete curves away beneath your feet until it almost disappears into the darkness below. During the day, tourists lean over the railings to take pictures without thinking twice about it. At night, it's different. There are fewer lights. The canyon below becomes one giant black shadow. You can still hear the river, but you can't always see it. Sometimes, all you can make out is a faint strip of moonlight reflecting off the water hundreds of feet below. It's enough to remind you that one mistake is all it would take. Most of the inspections we do are routine. Checking warning lights, looking for damage along the railings, making sure gates are locked, verifying cameras are still online. The kind of work that gets repetitive after a while. And that's exactly when people become careless. Scott used to tell me the same thing every week. Don't let the routine fool you. One windy night during my second year, maintenance called us out because one of the warning lights near the Arizona side had stopped working. Wasn't urgent, just another burned out bulb. Scott and I grabbed a replacement and headed out. The weather had changed since sunset. The wind coming through Black Canyon was stronger than usual. Not enough to shut down work, just enough that you noticed. Every few minutes, it would whistle across the top of the dam before disappearing into the darkness below. Scott walked ahead of me, carrying the toolbox. I looked over the side for a second. Big mistake. Even after working there for 2 years, looking straight down still made my stomach tighten. The river looked impossibly small. Cars crossing the bridge in the distance looked like toys. The wind suddenly picked up. Not much, just enough to make me instinctively shift my weight. Well, we replaced the light in less than 10 minutes. On the walk back, we passed one of the maintenance pullouts overlooking the canyon. There wasn't much there. Just a short section where crews could stage equipment during larger repairs. Scott stopped walking. Come here for a second. I walked over. Painted on the concrete, almost faded away after years in the sun, was a yellow line about 3 feet from the edge. I'd walked past it dozens of times, never paid attention to it. What is it? I asked. Scott shrugged. Nobody really knows. What do you mean? It was already here when I started. So why not repaint it? We do, he said. He looked toward the edge. To remind people. Remind them of what? I asked. How somebody thought it needed painting in the first place. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing the same yellow line in several places across the dam, always near maintenance areas, always a few feet back from the edge, never mentioned on any official map, never discussed during training, just there. One night I asked one of the engineers about it. He looked where I was pointing. Oh, that. Stay behind it. That's all he said, and then he walked away. Nobody ever gave me a better answer. Eventually, I stopped asking. Instead, I started paying attention. Whenever I worked outside, I'd noticed that every experienced employee naturally stayed behind those yellow lines. One night, a contractor stepped right over one while carrying a coil of cable. Scott called him back immediately. Behind the line. The contractor laughed. I'm still 10 feet from the edge. I know. So what's the problem? Scott didn't answer. He just kept staring until the contractor finally stepped back. The rest of us never crossed it. Maybe it was only a safety tradition. Maybe the line meant absolutely nothing. Or maybe, after working Hoover Dam long enough, you stop ignoring the little habits the older guys have, because every single one of them started for a reason. So that's rule 3, never stand too close to the edge. Maybe it's just because the drop is over 700 feet. Maybe it's because the wind through Black Canyon can surprise you. Or maybe, some rules don't need an explanation. Rule 4. If you hear a child calling from the water at 3:33 a.m., don't answer. The first time Scott told me about Rule 4, we were sitting in the maintenance office finishing paperwork after a 12-hour shift. It was almost sunrise, and everyone else had already gone home. Scott was signing inspection sheets while I cleaned out my locker. Without looking up, he asked me a strange question. You got kids? I shook my head. No. Nieces. Nephews. My sister's got 2, I said. Scott nodded. If you ever hear one of them calling for help out on the reservoir, don't answer. Scott slid the clipboard into a filing cabinet and locked it. I'm serious, Andre. That was the entire conversation. And for almost a year, I forgot about it. Unlike the red water or the stories about wings, Rule 4 almost never came up. Nobody talked about it in the break room. Nobody joked about it during inspections. Even the older guys avoided the subject. It was almost like saying too much about it somehow made it worse. The reservoir above the dam, it's enormous. During the day, it's full of boats, fishermen, kayaks, and tourists. At night, it's empty. That's one of the strangest things about working there. You can stand on top of the dam at 2 a.m. and look across miles of perfectly still water without seeing a single light. No boats, no voices, no engines. Just darkness. Sometimes, the moon reflects off the surface so perfectly it looks like polished glass. Other nights, you can't tell where the water ends and the sky begins. My job took me up there a few times every month. Usually it was something simple. Checking security fences, inspecting floodlights, walking the shoreline near the intake structures. Nothing exciting. One October night, I was doing exactly that. It had been unusually quiet. No wind or insects. Even the water looked frozen. I remember checking my watch while walking along the access road. 3:31 a.m. I still had one more gate to inspect before heading back inside, and that's when I heard it. Mister... The voice was quiet. So quiet, I honestly thought I'd imagined it. I stopped walking, The flashlight hung loosely at my side. Nothing, no movement or boats or people. I started walking again. "Mister." This time it was clearer. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She sounded scared, not screaming or crying, just scared. I slowly turned my flashlight toward the shoreline. Nothing. The beam stretched across the water without finding anything. And then I remembered what time it was. 3:33. Every hair on my arm stood up. The voice came again. "I'm cold." It wasn't far away, maybe 50 yards, somewhere out in the water. My first instinct was exactly what you'd expect. Somebody needed help. A child was out there. People don't stop to analyze things like that. You just react. I took one step toward the shoreline, then another. The rocks shifted under my boots. The voice sounded stronger now. "Please, I can't get out." I grabbed my radio. "This is Andre. Is anybody working the North Access Road?" Static. Then Scott's voice. "I'm here." "Yeah, I think there's somebody in the water." "No." "I hear a little girl." "No, you don't." His answer caught me completely off guard. "What?" "You stay where you are." "I'm telling you, Scott, there's..." "Andre." His voice had changed. It wasn't loud, but it was the most serious I'd ever heard him. "Do not go any closer." I looked back toward the reservoir. The surface hadn't changed, still perfectly calm and empty. And then the little girl spoke. This time she used my name. "Andre." I felt my stomach drop. I'd never reported my location over the radio. I'd never answered whoever or whatever was out there. Yet somehow it knew my name. I took another step backward. Scott was still talking through the radio. "Keep walking toward the access gate." "What is it?" "Just walk." The little girl's voice became more desperate then. "Please, my daddy left me. I don't want to die." And then the crying stopped. Complete silence. For maybe 5 seconds. When the voice returned, it wasn't a little girl anymore. The words were the same, but the voice wasn't. "Andre, come play with me." The sound rolled across the water like thunder. I didn't wait for Scott to tell me again. I turned around and I started running as fast as I could. Behind me, the voice laughed. Not a child's laugh, not even close. Every few seconds, it would almost get it right before slipping back into something much older. By the time I reached the security gate, Scott was already waiting for me. He didn't ask what I'd heard. He didn't need to. One look at my face was enough. We stood there for almost a minute without speaking. Finally, I asked him the question I'd been thinking ever since the radio call. "Has anyone ever gone looking?" Scott stared out across the black water. "A long time ago." "What happened?" "They never found anybody." "The child?" I asked. He slowly shook his head. "There wasn't one." Neither of us spoke after that. We locked the gate, finished the rest of our inspections, and watched the clock. The reservoir looked completely normal again. Just miles of silent water reflecting the moon. I don't know what calls from that reservoir, but if you ever find yourself working the night shift at the dam, and you hear a frightened child calling for help from the middle of a perfectly still reservoir at exactly 3:33 in the morning, don't answer. Rule 5. Never enter an unassigned maintenance tunnel alone. By the time you make it to Rule 5, you've usually stopped asking why the rules exist. You just follow them. Some make sense, some don't. Either way, they keep you alive. The fifth rule is surprisingly ordinary compared to the others. At least that's what I thought. Never enter an unassigned maintenance tunnel alone. Sounded like standard workplace safety. Buddy system. Confined spaces, nothing unusual. And then I actually started working inside the tunnels. From the outside, the dam doesn't look all that complicated. It's one giant wall of concrete holding back an enormous reservoir. Simple enough. Inside, it's a maze. There are maintenance galleries, drainage galleries, electrical corridors, ventilation passages, equipment rooms, inspection shafts, and stairwells connecting levels that seem to go on forever. Some tunnels are wide enough to drive a pickup truck through. Others barely let two people squeeze past each other. Almost every hallway looks the same. Gray concrete, steel doors, yellow safety rails, rows of pipes disappearing into the darkness. After a few hours underground, you completely lose your sense of direction. There aren't any windows. You can't see the sun. You can't hear traffic. The only constant is the low vibration from the generators. Eventually, every corridor starts looking identical. Scott warned me about that during training. Never trust your memory down here. I've got the maps, I said. You might not when the power goes out, he said. Every employee carried a radio, a flashlight, and a laminated map of the tunnel system. That sounds reassuring until you realize there are hundreds of intersections. A wrong turn doesn't usually put you in danger, it just wastes time. Most nights, that's all it is. Most nights. Well, one winter evening, maintenance reported a pressure sensor that had stopped responding. It wasn't a major repair, someone just needed to confirm the wiring hadn't been damaged. Scott was busy helping another crew, so he pointed toward the maintenance office. Grab the blueprints, I'll meet you down there. No problem, I said. I picked up the map, checked the tunnel number, and headed downstairs. The first 10 minutes were completely normal. Concrete corridor, left turn, steel door, another corridor, exactly like every other inspection. And then I reached a 4-way intersection. According to the map, I needed to go left. Except, there wasn't a left. The hallway shown on the blueprint simply didn't exist. Instead, there were 3 identical corridors stretching away into the darkness. I checked the map again. Same result. Wrong layout. I figured I'd counted intersections incorrectly. Easy mistake. So I picked the center hallway. 5 minutes later, I found another intersection, and again, it didn't match the map. I stopped walking, pulled out my radio. Yeah, this is Andre. Static. Scott, you copy? Nothing. I tried again, still nothing. The radio had worked perfectly upstairs, and now, just silence. That was the first time I realized how quiet those tunnels could become. Without the radio chatter, without footsteps, without anyone talking. All I could hear was the distant hum of machinery somewhere inside the concrete. It almost sounded like breathing. I told myself not to be ridiculous. This place was nearly 100 years old. Old buildings make noise, pipes expand, fans cycle on and off. Concrete settles. There was a logical explanation for everything. I took another hallway, then another. Nothing looked familiar. Every door had the same paint. Every light fixture looked identical. Every corridor stretched into another corridor. I checked my watch. Almost 40 minutes had passed. The repair should have taken 10. And for one of the first times since starting the job, I felt genuinely uncomfortable. I had absolutely no idea where I was. I stopped again and listened. Somewhere far ahead, I heard footsteps. Finally, somebody else was down here. Hello? No answer. The footsteps continued. heavy work boots by the side of him. I started walking toward them, and the strange thing was I never got closer. No matter how fast I walked, they stayed exactly the same distance away. Always around the next corner, always just out of sight. I called out again. Nothing, just footsteps. By then, I wasn't even thinking about the broken pressure sensor anymore. I just wanted another human being, another radio, another voice. I turned another corner, empty hallway. I heard the footsteps behind me then. I spun around. Nothing. The corridor I just walked through was completely empty. The footsteps stopped then. Every instinct I had told me to start running. Instead, I forced myself to stand still, take a breath, think. Scott always said panic was the quickest way to get lost. I closed my eyes for a second, listened. The generators, the ventilation fans, water moving somewhere inside the structure. And then faintly, a radio. Andre? Scott. I couldn't make out the words, only my name. I answered immediately. This is Andre. Static, then. Don't move. The transmission was broken, but it was enough. I stayed exactly where I was. Less than 2 minutes later, Scott rounded the corner carrying another flashlight. You alright? I got turned around. I know. How'd you find me? He held up a small tracking receiver clipped to his belt. Your radio. On the way back, I asked him about the footsteps. He didn't even look at me. What footsteps? The ones I kept hearing. Scott was quiet for several seconds. Finally, he shrugged. Yeah, I've heard them too. You ever figure out what they were? No. Were they another worker? I never found anybody. That was all he said. We finished the repair together. Took less than 5 minutes. As we climbed back into the main access corridor, I looked over my shoulder one last time. The tunnel was empty. Completely still. Nothing chasing us, nothing standing in the darkness. Just another stretch of gray concrete disappearing underground. Now maybe I imagined the footsteps. Maybe stress and isolation got the better of me. Maybe old tunnels play tricks on your ears. But I don't think so. Rule 6. If you ever see red balloons floating out of one of the drains, run. By the time I learned the 6th rule, I'd stopped trying to decide which stories were real and which ones weren't. I had seen enough strange things to understand one simple fact. You don't have to understand a rule to follow it. You just have to survive long enough to learn why it exists. The 6th rule wasn't written anywhere. Wasn't in the employee handbook. Wasn't posted on a bulletin board. Scott didn't even tell me himself. I overheard it. It was just after 2 in the morning, and a water main had burst inside one of the lower maintenance galleries. Half the night crew had been called in to help shut off valves before the flooding reached an electrical room. For almost 3 hours, everyone was busy. Maintenance, security, engineers. Even supervisors were carrying pumps and hoses. By the time we finally finished, everybody was exhausted. A few of us ended up sitting outside one of the service buildings, drinking bad coffee from paper cups while we waited for the maintenance report to be finished. Nobody was talking much. And then one of the older mechanics looked toward a storm drain near the edge of the roadway. Been about 9 years, he muttered. Another guy nodded. Closer to 10. Scott looked up immediately. Don't start. I'm just saying. We're due. Nobody laughed. Nobody asked what he meant. The conversation simply died. About 5 minutes later, everyone stood up, threw away their empty cups, and went back to work. I caught up with Scott before we headed inside. What was that about? What? The balloons, I said. He frowned. I didn't say anything about balloons. No, the mechanic did. I overheard him talking about it. Scott stopped walking. For a second, I thought he wasn't going to answer. And then finally he said, "Forget you heard it." "So there are balloons?" "No. You literally there are no balloons," he interrupted. He unlocked the security door and stepped inside. The conversation was over. That should have been enough, but it wasn't. The problem with telling someone to forget something is that it's almost impossible to do. Over the next few weeks, I started asking around. Not directly, just little questions. Nobody gave me a straight answer. Some people pretended they had no idea what I was talking about. Others simply changed the subject. One maintenance worker actually walked away in the middle of our conversation. That was unusual. The night crew talked about everything. Equipment failures, paychecks, sports, ghost stories. They never walked away. Unless the subject was balloons. About a month later, I finally got an answer, or at least part of one. Scott and I were inspecting one of the lower drainage galleries after a heavy rainstorm. Most people don't realize how much water moves through a dam besides the reservoir itself. Rainwater, groundwater, runoff, all has to go somewhere. The drainage system underneath the structure stretches for miles. Most of it is concrete tunnels just large enough for two people to walk side by side. Cold, wet, always echoing. We were checking for debris that might have blocked one of the grates. Scott stopped beside a rust-covered drain cover and shined his flashlight inside. "Clear." I checked the other one. Also clear. And then something caught my eye farther down the tunnel, maybe 50 yards away. Something bright red. At first I thought it was a warning flag somebody had dropped. And then it moved, slowly, floating. I narrowed my flashlight beam. It wasn't a flag. It was a balloon. Bright red. It drifted upward from the darkness beneath the drain tunnel, as if someone below had just let go of the string. It simply floated there, silent, turning slowly in the stale air. I stared at it for several seconds before speaking. "Scott?" He was already looking. The color drained from his face. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw genuine fear. He grabbed my arm hard enough to make me stumble. "We're leaving, right now." He didn't raise his voice, but there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. The kind of look people get when they've recognized something that they hoped they would never see again. He pulled me toward the tunnel entrance, and I looked back one last time. There were 2 balloons now, then 3, all of them rising silently from the darkness below. Scott grabbed my arm before I could take another step, and for just a split second I looked back. 2 yellow eyes were staring up at me from the darkness below. We didn't wait to see anything else. The steel door slammed shut, and a single heavy impact echoed from the other side. Well, we finished out the rest of our shift and went home that morning. But I have never forgotten that night. The strange thing is, life eventually settled back into something that almost felt normal. Not normal by anyone else's standards, obviously, but normal for us. The water still turned red every night between midnight and 1. Every new employee still got warned about wearing earbuds outside after dark. The yellow lines were still repainted every few years. Nobody answered voices coming from the reservoir. Nobody entered maintenance tunnels alone. And nobody ever mentioned the balloons. You stop asking why after a while. You stop trying to solve every mystery. Instead, you learn the rules, you follow them, then you go home. I think that surprises people. They imagine working somewhere like this would feel terrifying every single night. It doesn't. Most nights are completely ordinary. You check doors, replace light bulbs, walk your route, fill out paperwork, drink coffee, and watch the sun come up. And then you drive home like anyone else after a long shift. Sometimes months go by without anything unusual. Long enough that you almost convince yourself the older guys were just telling stories. Long enough that you start wondering if maybe you imagined some of it yourself. And then something happens. A faucet starts dripping just before midnight. A sound echoes across the top of the dam that shouldn't exist. A voice calls your name from the water. Footsteps follow you through an empty tunnel. Or you catch a flash of red just out of the corner of your eye. And suddenly every story you've ever been told comes rushing back. People ask me all the time if I'd ever take another job. Maybe, someday. I've thought about it more than once. But then I ask myself a simple question. If I left, who would warn the next guy? Because nobody puts those rules in the employee handbook. You only hear them from the people who've survived long enough to pass them on. Maybe that's why they're still around. So if you ever find yourself working the night shift somewhere old, somewhere built out of thousands of tons of concrete, somewhere with endless tunnels beneath your feet and miles of black water behind your back, listen to the old guy training you, even if what he says sounds impossible. Especially then, because every rule has a story.
There was this ice bucket challenge a few years ago where people would stand and wait for one of their friends to suddenly drop chilling cold water all over their body, and I'm not talking about just regular ordinary bathtub water. I'm talking about water that was nearly at sub-zero or had been taken out of a frozen lake. Something that would automatically send a shock through your body. Going into cryo sleep is like that, except 1,000 times worse. Because the jabbing cold, a pain of the needles entering into your body and then the fluids pumping through your veins feels like you're dying, or at least you want to die, but you can't because you're stuck, trapped in a box where the only hope you have is that the sensation will finally stop and that you can fall asleep, but even in the recesses of your subconscious, you will still feel the pain. When I found out that I was going to be placed in the tube for nearly 6 months to the farthest reaches of Jupiter, I thought that it sounded impossible. As far as I knew, Musk was the only guy around spending billions to get people to Mars, so deep space exploration wasn't even in the cards in our lifetime, or even our children's lifetime, I thought. Turns out that I was wrong. A sharp jolt to my head had told me that I was being woken by the onboard ship's computer, which by all accounts seemed a little too early until I saw the nearby monitor confirm that we had traveled the necessary distance across the stars. Turning over on my side, I spat up some saliva and blood, my body aching from the dormancy. Before I could get another gasp of air out, one of the onboard robotic guards was behind me with a metallic muzzle, placing it over my mouth roughly like I was supposed to be a caged dog. Considering the circumstances behind my confinement back on Earth, I couldn't blame them. But then I saw that I wasn't being given special treatment. The 7 other passengers for this death cruise to the stars were also being shackled and dragged out toward a command center. Once lined up, all of us got a chance to peer out at the beautiful view of Jupiter and the stars beyond. I wished I could appreciate it. Attention all inmates, we have nearly arrived at our destination, Space Station TXRTS. codenamed the Tartarus. Please listen carefully to the following pre-recorded message from our corporate sponsors. And the intercom computer announced, and then a strange, grindy anthem played over a projected film of the blonde-haired woman that had first approached me while back in Kingsport. Cosmonauts, brethren, you stand on the precipice of new discoveries and truths that no other human has ever imagined. When you left Earth, you were only considered refuse, prisoners to be disposed of by countries that couldn't see your potential. Now you arrive in tandem to prove them wrong. Your mission is simple. Document as much as you can concerning the space station. To do so, your new gear has come equipped with microscopic digital sensors which will automatically feed the data of your search back to the craft. Once we have determined that we have sufficient information concerning Tartarus, your life support systems will be cut off and your mission will be accomplished. Do not attempt to run or hack any of your gear, or termination will occur at any given moment. The video feed cut off and I swore the prisoner next to me was chuckling beneath the mask. It was humorous in a dark way, given that we had all been promised executions on Earth before the launch. I suppose none of us really assumed that a return trip was going to be possible, but hearing confirmation that our only purpose here was to be living cameras for their campaign, it made me feel angry. I thought that I had come to terms with the fact that I was going to spend the rest of my days in a cell paying for my crimes, but having that taken away to play puppet in space for some rich elites made my blood boil. Next, the computer gave us areas of the station to explore. Mine was labeled as Area D, and the man next to me with the bizarre sense of humor was assigned as my partner. Since we had no ability to speak to one another, I pointed at him and gestured with my hand at the number 2, and then back at myself as number 1. All he did in response was hold up the middle finger and then move toward the first seal where our craft connected to this mysterious station. I had no idea what to expect on the other side, nor any way to voice my concerns with my partner, so the only option was to keep a close but safe distance from each other as the airlock slowly creaked open and the dark corridors beyond came into view. Inside my helmet, a stream of data began to feed its way down in front of my eyes, telling me what the elites had gleaned about this place before our arrival. Codenamed Tartarus Station, so named for the Grecian abyss where the titans of legend were said to be imprisoned by Zeus. This is the first known record of an unknown space orbital of any kind. It is viewed as the first step by our species to contact extraterrestrials. Since its discovery, there has been no indication of any energy signatures or propulsion detected, and satellite imagery has only provided the following details. Size approximately 450 feet. Weight estimated 1.6 million pounds. Shape. The design rivals traditional designs from any known human culture, but popular opinion states that the orbital is similar to the biblical description of angels. Due to this, many suggested that the station initially be named Valkyria. However, the scans soon revealed that it is likely the station has remained unmanned for well over a millennia, which led to the consensus to view it as a prison, a final resting place for whatever species had built it. I couldn't help but think that it was ironic they had chosen to send criminals to such a place, and I wondered how accurate that was for the station's initial purposes. My headlamps kept the corridors illuminated as we had separated from the rest of our team, entering Area D, and I tried my best to make sense of what that purpose might be. Like the idea of being frozen in space, the concept of aliens had been just fantasy to me a week ago. Maybe if I paid more attention in science class about theories relating to this sort of thing, I would know what I was looking at. So many poor choices had led me here, I reflected. It made me wonder what sort of choices this race had made to build this place and then to die out. An alert on my visor told me to stop and allow my built-in camera to take better pictures of some kind of console, and I noticed that there were symbols etched into the display, indications of a language, which I suppose is unsurprising given how sophisticated everything else was. But what did shock me is that a few moments later, my camera feed told me that the computer for our ship had figured out a translation based just on what was there. Analysis indicates this console is a habitat monitor of some kind. Further data of surrounding area needed. My partner grunted for me to shine a light on the larger portion of the room, where we saw what looked like miniature biomes, each self-contained within a hive-like system of metallic pylons. If this was a monitor that was testing the viability of different types of environments for life, perhaps that meant this race had been searching for a new home. The data further revealed that there was a network beneath our feet of intricate wires and equipment that the scans confirmed were once meant to serve as generators. But I doubted anything like that could possibly power up after all this time. Instead of focusing on that query, I decided to follow the nearby corridor to one of the exterior rings for the station, marveling at the design. It appeared that the rings were meant to serve as some sort of perpetual motion, phasing in and out of space around them at rapid speed. It just didn't seem humanly possible, but I had to remind myself that this was a species far beyond our capability. Still, as I climbed one of the rings, I noticed that a lot of the structure reminded me of things that might be found on Earth, which seemed impossible. I've always imagined that the architecture, the way of life, and even ordinary things like doors and windows would be completely different from alien species. Not so here. Maybe that was why our holders were so interested in this place. It wasn't simply about discovery, but exploiting this technology for our own advantage. As a criminal, that was something I could relate to. We are not so different, I thought as a reminder of complying with our instructions had flashed on my screen. I guess that was enough curiosity, I thought as I began to climb down. And just as I was halfway, I heard the most unusual noise. If you've ever fired up an old pickup truck after it's been sitting there for a few months, it was a similar sound except 1,000 times louder. And then the entire ring began to move. It happened so quickly that I lost my bearings and fell to the ground as the noise grew louder. Thanks to the low gravity, the fall didn't cause any injury. As I recovered, I saw the rings move faster and faster until their movements were so quick that I couldn't even be sure what I was looking at. And then I heard the noise from the habitats and I looked to see that they had activated. Somehow my partner had found a way to spark a flow of electricity from the grid below our feet, the entire pattern glowing brighter than a Christmas tree. Some other portions of the ship began to pull back and shake, the entire thing humming with life, as it seemed to surge stronger and stronger, soon becoming out of control. All the noise made me want to cover my ears, and then I felt blood begin to trickle out of them. Soon we had another problem on our hands. The habitats had begun to spread apart and reveal what looked like a large engine that was thrumming to life. The readout on my helmet alerted all of us to take cover, but it's not like we had anywhere to run. Instead, I could feel the entire station beginning to shake and vibrate as the rings closed in on the central mass and connected to this engine. As the two massive structures collided, I was sure that it would mean our demise would be swift, all of the station splitting apart the way that an atom does at the moment of such a massive explosion of energy. But instead, the room filled with light, and I found myself being flung across the room like a rag doll. Another astronaut hit the exterior ring and went flying, never to be seen again. Moments later, the space station lurched backward and everything began to come to a halt. My head still felt like it was spinning even after the noise had faded away, and my body felt that it had been crushed by 10 tons of bricks. Everything was painful, but I knew something strange and momentous had just happened, so I found the strength to move. When I got over toward the exterior of the viewport, I saw that we were no longer anywhere near Jupiter, nor any stars that I recognized, and the data on my screen was now a dead feed, making me wonder if we had lost the transmissions from the shuttle. At the same moment, another strange noise occurred, and it was accomplished by flashing lights, which I took to mean a warning. Rushing to the other side of the corridor alongside my partner, I saw that our facility was now hurtling toward a new planet at rapid speed. We were going to be experiencing a crash landing. This time I knew that the only way to survive would be to take shelter. I began to climb the honeycomb grid, and getting inside one of the many habitats and sealed it up even as the atmosphere hit the station. Everything around me began to ignite with fire from the chemicals in the environment, and I closed my eyes for the moment of impact. Nothing could have properly prepared me for such a situation. But as the rock and dust and debris crashed all around me, I kept telling myself that I would find a way to survive. And somehow I did. When things had finally settled, the habitat that I had locked myself in had broken from the network and rolled out of the crash site, leaving me to be tangled in a mess of metal and alien foliage. Immediately, I started to kick apart my cage, falling down to the solid ground below and coughing as I tried to recalibrate my entire body. Somewhere close by, I heard a shout of praise and laughter, and then I saw my partner standing near to the edge of the corroded window to the station, his muzzle somehow broken off by the crash. That was intense," he screamed. Two things ran through my mind. First, that he now had the ability to free me. And second, that the planet had breathable oxygen. We were very fortunate. I motioned for him to get my muzzle off, but before he did, we heard noises from under the rubble. A few moments later, we had isolated them and found 3 other survivors, 2 women and another man, and the others of our skeleton crew were nowhere to be found. Over the next half hour, we pushed out of the jungle overgrowth into a spacious valley, and it was there that my partner finally agreed to get our muzzles off. "The fresh air, wow," the woman next to me hollered. Even after it was off my mouth, I found myself still in silence. I was in awe of our surroundings. The valley spread out in all directions with rivers, forests, and vegetation. It was like a depiction of paradise. I explained as I began to settle into the concept that something good could come out of this. "We're quite likely outside the known Milky Way," the second woman, a black girl named Kayla, commented as we started back toward the ruined station. "Without any means of communication with our shuttle, that means that our kill command can't transmit properly. We're free," she announced. It was tough coming to terms with the reality at first, maybe because I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would we live here now? For how long? Was returning to Earth even possible? And would we want to return if we had the opportunity? None of those questions could be answered right then and there. So Kayla and the senior of our group, Thomas, made camp near the debris, and we all got to know each other a little bit better. "Okay, before we make introductions, I want one thing clear. This shall be tabula rasa, a clean slate. We're not going to discuss any crimes that led us to be incarcerated, only our values and what identifies us. I think it's only fair we take the chance to build something new here," Thomas told us. "What do you think that means? Are you saying that we start a whole new life here?" Rem, the younger woman, asked. Miguel, the man that had almost died from the entry crash, commented that it was quite likely that no rescue would ever come for us. Earth is just a distant memory now. For all intents and purposes, We are going to make a colony here, I guess." The man that I had once been partners with, who called himself Zero, chuckled. "What's so funny?" Kayla asked. "Well, if this little new world order is going to be successful, one thing is clear. Somebody's going to have to start shacking up with somebody else. So how do we decide who gets to become lovebirds? Do we draw straws?" The uncomfortable silence that followed told me that nobody else had considered that, but it was a valid point. "I think we can't make any sort of big decision until we understand more about this world," Thomas told him. It was clear that he felt that he needed to be a leader, perhaps because of his age. So that night, we lay beneath the stars and agreed to remain closer to the debris as we begin to explore the area and learn what we can about the flora and fauna. A whole new world, ours for the taking, I thought, as the night finally allowed me to settle. For the first time since being out here amid the stars, I felt like I could hope again. We chose to expand from the debris of Tartarus after that first night, using what we could from the wreckage as makeshift weapons and cutting down the foliage until we arrived at a wide open field with nothing but green grass and a few trees to see for miles. "This place is beautiful," Kayla commented with a whistle. Zero dropped his weapon and let the midday breeze give him a chance to smell the air. "Question is, can we live here?" he muttered. I'd been wondering the same thing. Our hope of survival depended on finding food, animals, and water. We were lucky to have breathing air, but the chances of not surviving were exponentially higher than making it to see another day. "Let's try and have a little faith. It's a miracle that we even made it this far, right?" I commented as we started to move again. Miguel had spotted what he thought might be an orchard of some kind. As we got closer and the horizon became clearer, I realized that it was a massive, overgrown garden of trees and flowers, all intertwined together with what looks like metal and vines. "And do you suppose the aliens that built that craft came from here, and the Tartarus was their escape to a new world?" Miguel wondered. And Thomas cut through the thick layer of weeds that covered one tree and found what looked like prickly pears. "Oh, we can wonder about that another day. I think this should be safe to eat," he commented and gestured towards the other fruits nearby. It was a vast field of different kinds, all of which seemed to mostly be rotting except for the ones that he had picked. "This ecosystem is so bizarre," the second woman, who I learned was named Blair, had commented as we started a fire and I watched the sky darken. "This place feels so empty too, though. I think that we might be the only living things here," I said. And just then we heard something from amid the foliage and I grabbed my scrap metal to defend the others. Zero emerged with his trousers down from taking a piss and remarked, "I think you all ought to see this." Amid the dense forest, he found a metallic object, large and impaled in one tree. Its strange, twisted blade causing the tree to give off an ethereal glow, and to pulse the way that a heart might. Amid the roots of the tree I saw what looked like scars, and as I got closer I realized that they were symbols, resembling the ones that we had seen on the space station. "It looks like your theory was right, kid. So much about this feels so surreal, and yet so familiar," Kayla admitted as we chose to set up camp near the glowing tree. Something about its foliage and fruit seemed different than the rest, as though it was the core of the network and supplying all else. "I've felt that way since we got to the station, really. I know it sounds crazy, but I think these aliens, they might have been connected to our very first ancestors," Thomas remarked. Zero was trying to climb the tree to reach one of the branches that offered the crystalline fruit, and I asked Thomas what he meant, and so he gestured around us before commenting. "Oh, it's like Kayla said. This place, it feels like a distant memory, or a shared dream that anyone can recognize. Something deep inside all of us senses a connection to this place. Don't deny that, he said. He was right, but the fact scared me. It seemed impossible. Humans have only just barely started understanding space travel. All of the things that we saw on that station and even this biologically advanced plant life, it's light years ahead of our current tech, I commented. I'm not trying to say that I fully grasp it either, but I feel certain that this place holds answers to some of our deepest truths, the very origins of our species, he said. Just then, Zero tossed a glowing fruit down to Blair and then one to me. Oh, sounds like mumbo jumbo to me. I've read my Bible and I don't remember it ever saying God made man and then sent him to Earth, he remarked. Oh, so you're a preacher now, are you? Kayla said with a chuckle as she tried to get a bite of it. The exterior of the fruit was harder than a rock. Oh, I got as far as Genesis, he retorted, which caused a few chuckles. I stared at the fruit, a thought forming as I remembered some of those stories myself. My grandma used to read a book of Bible tales right before bed. The stories of creation and the first sin had always been one of my favorites, so the scriptures stuck in my head. And then God said, let us make mankind in our image. I mumbled as I stood up and looked at the sword-like tree and the overgrowth around us. What's gotten into you? Miguel asked. The Lord took man and placed him in the garden. I responded and pointed at the tree. And from every tree of the garden you should eat, but from the tree in the middle of the garden you must not eat, for in the day you eat from it you will positively perish. Zero laughed aloud. I think you're taking things too serious, man. That crash must have jostled your noggin. No, don't you see? This is the Garden of Eden, I said excitedly as I looked at the fruit. And this must be the tree of life, the one that God sealed off when mankind became sinful. Kayla paused from trying to break apart the fruit. Slow down. Are you really saying you think this is the real Garden of Eden? I mean, we're literally millions of years from Earth. I didn't see it at first, but now, I think it's undeniable. The shared experience of a common ancestry, the familiarity even though none of us have been here. Our theories might be right. This may be where the first man and woman came into existence, I told them. Zero finally broke open the fruit. It looked like a swirling mass of worms that was eating itself over and over again, and it was an even brighter light than the tree. Now, let's say you're right. If so, then God was actually some alien race. Wait, where's this God now? I didn't have an answer, but none of us were sure what to do now, except Zero. He bit into the worms and let them slither into his mouth. What the heck are you doing? You don't know what that could do, Miguel shouted. No, I'm testing the theory that Adam here just spouted. If this is the tree of life like you claim, that means it'll make me immortal with just one bite. He took his weapon, and before any of us could object, he ran the sharp end of the blade right along his belly. The blood seeped out for a moment as all of us watched and waited to see if he would topple over from shock, but instead, the skin began to seal back almost instantly, the way that you might see in the movies. The wound was gone and there wasn't even a scar. My goodness, Blair whispered. So then it's like the cure for cancer, influenza, and the plague all in a single dose, Kayla asked. Death itself won't be able to touch us, Thomas said, and then he asked Zero to climb up and get some for the rest of us. A few moments later, we all had one and got to work breaking them apart. Once we were done, all of us had decided to eat together. On the count of 3, Miguel suggested. and on 3, we devoured that fruit. And then we all took turns, much like Zero did, putting the fruit to the test. It was a bizarre sort of ritual that reminded me of a college frat party that I had been kicked out of once. We kept pushing our limits for the rest of the night, laughing at the newfound power that we had gained. Oh, I wish that moment had also been eternal, because what came after was the real nightmare. Our descent into madness was a gradual one. I wish it was something that I could have seen hints of, but that is not how it spreads. As the days passed, we began to work and create a small home for ourselves, which we called New Eden. And eventually we began to create farms and roadways that spread outward from there. Miguel and Blair grew closer as the weeks passed by, working side by side. And I remember the first big milestone was when they announced that they were going to try and have a baby. I imagined that child growing and having children of its own, free of sickness and death, until one day, this whole world was filled with perfection. If anything was going to be a utopia, it would be the one that we were now making. Over the next week, however, Blair experienced the early stages of pregnancy, morning sickness and dizziness, and even had difficulty moving around. And then in the second week, I realized that she had begun to show signs of a bulging stomach, something that ordinarily wouldn't happen until the 3rd trimester. We need equipment to figure out what's happening. Do you suppose anything on the Tartarus might be of use? Thomas wondered. I didn't have an answer, but Kayla and I agreed to look the next day. And that night, her pain got more severe. The baby inside her was growing at a much faster rate than she could handle. At one point, when her screams woke me, I saw it stretching her skin to its near breaking point. But because she kept healing over and over, it would never actually break through. Kayla gave her something that we had found which seemed to work as a sedative, and it gave me a concerned look as our friend finally fell asleep. And then we both sat in silence and looked at her distressed eyes, and I found myself wondering if this was the price that we would all pay. And the next day, as we searched the debris of the craft, Kayla told me that she was worried too. She won't be able to die from this, but it'll be a living hell, and that will be far worse. She'll be begging for death, she said as her eyes welled up with tears. There's gotta be a way to help her. Zero has been scouring further and further to the west of the rivers, near those mountains we thought might house old facilities. If we can't find anything here, I'm sure that he will there. I told her. Well, what if he doesn't though? What if she's doomed to just keep on experiencing this suffering forever? I knew that she was also equally worried about her own future, but I stayed quiet. I didn't have the answers anyway. Blair's screams didn't stop until the middle of the night. And when I went to go see why, I only discovered more terror. Zero was standing over her with a large rock and had smashed her face in, enough where it would take a few hours for the fruit that we had eaten to make her recover. I couldn't even find a reason to be angry when I saw what her unborn child had done to her body. It was tearing against her skin, trying to break free, and it had even gotten to the point of breaking her back. We have to find a way for it to be free, he said. I'm not proud of what we did, but as we aided in its release, the creature's head finally burst out, its head bulbous and its voice shrill with anger and pain. Dear Lord, I said as Zero disposed of it. The poor beast finally silenced. We've only delayed our problems. Zero wiped sweat and red from his brow, tossing the rock aside. Come with me. There's something that I want you to see. I asked him where we were headed as we left camp, but my guide remained silent, the sun rising over our new colony a few hours later as we left anything that I was familiar with. Most of the world around us was uncultivated soil, and Zero had been searching for something that might give us insight on what went wrong all those ages ago, when our ancestors also ate from the tree. Finally, we arrived at a valley where I saw a structure that was about as tall as the sky itself. It was broken and dismantled, having fallen from the East Canyon above us, but it was still a marvel to behold such an immense skyscraper. I give you babble, or at least, that's what it appears to be anyway, he told me as we got over the next set of rocks. I vaguely recalled the biblical legend. It was a place where supposedly God had mixed up all the languages. Inside the empty tower, we saw endless arrays of computers, machines, and other forms of technology that rivaled anything that we had ever seen, and it too reminded me of the Tartarus. Zero reached one of the terminals that still had an ethereal glow to it and explained, I found it a few days ago. It activated when I shed blood. He paused and cut his hand to let the blood flow into the circuitry, and I watched as a holographic man appeared. He was tall, perhaps at least 9 feet, and had the appearance of a regal officer, but his features looked troubled. And as he spoke in an unknown tongue, Zero said, And this is where I need help. Can't make sense of anything they say. I started checking the computers, using my rudimentary methods from before our arrival to hack into the system. It was a bit archaic, but it worked. Soon the projector started to change its format into a different language, and then another. Finally, we could listen to what it had to say. Our species has reached its zenith with this new discovery, the one thing that we lacked, the one thing that can give us purpose. The research team of Colony 1 disagrees with these findings, hence the motive behind their attack. However, if we're ever going to leave this place and spread our seed into the universe, then we must be successful, the man said. It revealed detailed schematics of the Tartarus, which confirmed that this was how our ancestors had made it to the stars. The ship shall be the ark that saves our species. Once we have traveled the length of a generation, we shall have all connection to this place purged thanks to the virus that we have crafted. Flooding our bodies with this much intense infection will of course have a secondary effect, erasing our immortality. The next bit of the hologram showed what I could only assume was the dispersal of the virus into the atmosphere as they left the planet. The feed showed every single thing on the planet would be consumed and eventually rot and die. The apocalypse protocol that we've crafted is a secondary backup in case we fail, to ensure that this never happens again. If anybody else discovers this world and what we did here, this will be their salvation. The recording ended and it showed the Tartarus again, this time with different schematics that explained where the supervirus was kept, and Zero commented, And we need to find that. It's the only way to be free of those things that Blair had given birth to. Outside the tower, we heard a howl across the plains, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. That creature was recovered and possibly it was moving from the colony to find us. We had to act fast. The orbital is about a day's journey from here. Let's go, I told him. And we left those ruins and started traveling east, my heart pounding each step of the way as we avoided any trace of the creature. We were nearly in the clear when I heard it moving through the brush. Zero and I began to run, weaving between trees and overgrown fields to reach the orbital. But the creature was faster. It leapt from the trees and latched onto Zero, its fingernails tearing into his back as it pinned him down. I stumbled and held my breath as the gigantic newborn shrieked and attacked him, its misshapen features a testament to what the newborn power had done to human biology. its misshapen features a testament to what the newfound power had done to human biology. It had to be twice its size and against 4 times as strong. Zero kept fighting though, screaming for me to run as he distracted it. His bones were breaking over and over again as the two danced around the jungle, each trying to overpower the other. The distraction, I knew, wouldn't last forever. With that sort of strength, eventually Zero would be wounded beyond a quick recovery of healing. So I decided to leave him behind as I reached the edge of the jungle and saw the Tartarus off in the distance. I didn't look back as Zero's screams became more intense. And then at last it grew silent, which actually frightened me even more. That meant that Zero was unconscious, and the creature was likely now hunting me. Reaching the station, I pushed myself through the debris and began to search what portions of the place were not destroyed. I saw my old helmet, which we had once considered to be a part of our inmate uniform, and I turned on the headlamp illuminating my steps. As I started to roam, I found my thoughts reflecting on our journey here. We thought that we could escape fate, escape death. This was never freedom at all. We wished that we could have simply perished a long time ago, amid the safety of stars that we recognized. The Tartarus simply had to still have access to the virus, otherwise I wasn't sure what we were going to do. Climbing down an old elevator shaft, I reached a submerged portion of the station and recognized these symbols on the outside to indicate that it was some sort of lab. I dove under the water and pushed myself into the room, adjusting my vision to the cloudy water as I tried to see if anything was intact. I grabbed whatever I could, pushing myself into the next corridor and coming up for air. Placing the vials on the side of the twisted metal, I examined the materials inside each of them. I really only had one way to make sure the virus was actually effective. I realized it taking out a syringe. I couldn't bring back the wrong thing. So I braced myself and plunged it into my thigh. Gasping for air, I felt my heart suddenly stop, and then it felt like it was going to explode. The world didn't stop spinning for a good second, and when it did, I found my entire body was shaking and convulsing. I turned over and began to vomit bile, along with the rest of the worms that I had consumed years ago, and then I simply laid there on the metal, still gasping for air as I struggled to move. My hand cut against these sharp ends of the metal as I got up and pulled back in pain, noticing that the wound did not heal. The injection must have already started to reverse the process of immortality, I thought as I got up on my feet. I searched for another exit, and I found an elevator shaft to my right, tilted and running straight into one of the massive trees. Somewhere above me, I heard the newborn monster scream, and I hastened to climb up and out. Without protection, I'd be dead. Squeezing in between some of the branches and the hole in the wall, I found that I could barely breathe, and then my foot got stuck. I panicked and twisted it, trying to get it loose as I heard the shrieks get louder. And then I saw its silhouette at the top of the elevator, and the gruesome infant started crawling toward me. I barely got my foot out and tumbled down the tree as I heard it leap. My lungs released all of their air as I hit the ground, and I laid there paralyzed in just a moment. The creature stared at me, and I started to climb down faster. I grabbed a few rocks and chucked them at the monster as I got on my foot. My body ached and my muscles spasmed, the effects of the virus running its course as I became mortal again. The newborn attacked and we tumbled down a hill. I used my fingers to poke its eyes, and the beast reared back and hollered, giving me a chance to run free. I saw a river and I immediately jumped into it. The creature didn't follow, trying to find its way around to where I swam. I wasn't sure why it hesitated, but I used the momentum of the stream to push away, focusing on the rising sun. If I followed this path, I should be only 10 minutes from the camp. The screaming behind me didn't stop, and so I kept my pace and followed a fresh path of destruction, eventually finding Thomas and Kayla and Blair. "What's happening? Where's Zero?" Kayla asked. I showed them the vials to explain what the virus did, making them all quiet as they heard what I had to say. "So this virus, it's death, going back to being mortal?" Thomas asked me carefully. Blair was already eager to take the medicine, her ordeal with the newborn enough to make her desperate to die. They watched as she injected herself and began to convulse the way that I had, and then she gave us all a hug and smiled at me at last. She told me thank you. We watched in silence as she went to the nearest cliff and she hurled herself off of it. There was a sudden finality to our long ordeal when we saw that she had perished, and Thomas bravely said that before we took each other out, we had to make sure that this planet was destroyed. "The apocalypse protocol you mentioned, how do we activate that?" he asked. I told him about the tower and how it likely once served as a means of communication with the station, and so we left the camp immediately to get there. The tower was at least a day away, and I knew that the creature Blair had given birth to was still searching for us, so there wasn't any time for rest. Even though I was the only one in the party that could now get hurt, I became even more vigilant. Nothing else mattered to me except finally getting to destroy this wretched rock. It began to storm as we passed through the first portion of the valley, our sweat and blood staining the air. The predatory newborn was close. When we saw the tower, I insisted that they go ahead. "If I can distract it, you'll have time to activate the tower." The command center was close to the level where the canyon had crushed the skyscraper. "How will you know if we succeed?" Kayla asked. I thought about the video where I saw the destructive power of the bomb detonating across the entire planet, and I promised her that I would know. "Once the signal can be sent out, we will all meet our maker," I told her. And they left me there as I caught my breath again and I waited for the creature to find me. I didn't just sit by though, I set a trap. One of those makeshift holes that you might find to catch a tiger. It would be enough to slow it down, maybe even enough for my friends to get that signal working. There is also an alternative that I'm dreading where everything goes wrong and they can't actually destroy this world. In that case, I'll fling myself into this pit and let nature take its course. The only way out is death. It was the answer that we were given all along. It just took living forever to recognize how precious living is. The creature came like I knew it would, and I smiled, weapon in hand, as I saw the beacon starting to light up. This is the end for me, but maybe if this message it gets back to somebody else and it's not, I only ask that you send others here to kill us, to put an end to all of this. If not for our sakes, then to prevent this curse from ever spreading. Goodbye. Calling the little place that I lived in a sleepy small town seems ironic right about now. It's not like any of us were going to sleep anytime soon, or ever again maybe. I've been awake for 72 hours now, so give me a little grace when it comes to keeping my story straight. The past few days in Hazelwood have been chaotic for everyone, and we're all running on fumes. The last morning, everything was normal with Saturday. I ran out to Wally's grocery to get a few things to throw on the grill that night. Figured that I would have a couple of friends over, a few drinks, set up the fire pit now that the weather was getting more crisp. Have a nice night. I barely got through the door when the truck started going through the streets. A pre-recorded message playing asking everybody to return to their homes for their own safety. An alert came through on my phone within seconds, echoing the sentiments. Emergency alert. Please stay indoors. Intense weather events imminent in your area. For your own safety, please remain inside with windows and doors closed. Weird, but okay. Maybe there was a storm system coming through. But why wouldn't it say that there would be a tornado watch or something? Everyone else was just as confused, milling back to their cars to head back home. I did the same, hopping in my crappy old hatchback and getting back home within minutes. After going inside, I sat up near the window for a few minutes, curious to see what might be going on. Well, the alert wasn't wrong. Clouds rolled in quick, massive, dark, and swirling ones. I could see purple lightning even discharging in some, with the occasional flash of green coming through. The rain that came with it brought a smell that I could pick up even from inside the house. Metallic, though with a hint of acidity that almost stung my nostrils. There was nobody out on the streets, not even animals running around. All in all, it came down pretty hard, but it only lasted maybe 20 minutes at most. The second alert followed not long after everything had stopped, this one making me a lot more nervous than the first. Emergency alert. Please remain indoors. Stay awake, do not fall asleep or allow any friends and loved ones to do the same. Please stay tuned for further updates. This one had me. I honestly thought that it was a hoax for a minute, like that time that somebody sent a fake nuke warning to everyone in Hawaii. The more I looked around outside though, the more I wondered. Everything was too still, especially for a Saturday morning. Not even the birds were chirping. Hell, even the crickets and frogs that normally would be throwing a rave after every shower didn't have anything to say. Just eerie quiet, not even a breeze to rustle the leaves. An ambulance cut the silence, tearing down the main street just a few dozen feet away, going further into town. They didn't usually go that fast down this part of the road, considering all the residential homes out here that they had to blow by. I walked out on my front porch, looking around to see what the hell might be going on. Strange weather, ain't it? A gruff voice shouted over to me. Across the road and to the left, old Mr. Hutch was sitting on his porch, rocking in that same old chair that he spent hours in. Yeah, weird stuff. Those alerts seem real to you? I asked. He looked at me, not understanding, so I held up my phone to him. The emergency alerts that came through, did you get them? Oh, I ain't got one of those damn things, and just the landline. I don't need all that Facebook and Twitter bullshit, he said, starting to go off louder. There's something happening in town. Not sure, to be honest. I just got an alert that said stay inside and don't fall asleep. Might not want to stay in that rocker too long just in case, I said. He only laughed. Son, I've taken Saturday naps at noon since I was a boy. Didn't even miss them when I was riding choppers in Vietnam. The cell phones ain't gonna stop that. He chuckled out. I couldn't help but laugh along with him. Man had his priorities after all. Not like I could argue him out of taking a nap on his porch. Well, enjoy it. I'll catch you later. Tell Mrs. Hutch I still want her Swedish meatball recipe when she gets a chance. We both gave parting waves and I stepped back inside, moving into my home office just down the hallway from the front door. Cracking the blinds here, I had a full view of the neighborhood, including Hutch now beginning to nod off on his porch. While I booted up my computer and started getting a little bit of work done, I just figured I would keep an eye on things. I don't know how much time had passed. Maybe minutes, maybe an hour at most. But I started noticing him kind of jerking around in the seat. I mean, the guy was in his late 70s, so I got a little nervous and I started to head outside, seeing what if he needed help or was just having a bad dream. I barely made it off my porch when his head quite literally ejected from his body. I don't know how else to describe it. It fired right off his shoulders like a damn firework on Independence Day. As soon as it did though, something else just sprouted right from the bloody stump, taking up residence where his head was before. It looked like this centipede thing. Tons of spindly legs coming out of the sides with one huge hexic eye right in the center. It bent and swayed on the shoulders as it extended from his body, getting used to it before making it stand, walking into his house next. For a minute I was split on what to do. Either run back into my place and barricade the door or run in and try to save Mrs. Hutch, assuming that she was in there. Not that I had to assume long, as a scream cut the air just seconds later. No time to think, I ran full burst up the porch steps and through the front door, emerging on a terrifying scene. Hutch's body was pressing down on his wife, the massive centipede bursting from his stump neck and striking at her. It had already gotten her a couple of times, dozens of sharp tendrils extending from the mouth of the thing that had nicked at her skin. Apparently that's all it took. Something secreted in those pincers was winning the battle over Mrs. Hutch, making her quickly lose consciousness and fall to the floor. As she fell asleep, the Hutch centipede thing got up, turning attention to me now as it walked forward. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, no, leave me alone, Hutch, I swear to God," I said, scrambling to find anything that could function as a weapon. There was a bag of golf clubs right by the door. Not sure what I was about to get from it, but gripping one of the handles, I pulled it up, emerging with the driver. Good enough. No hesitation. This thing didn't have a damn head and it didn't have any rights other than what it was about to get. I swung the club hard, catching the centipede thing right on the tip, making it hiss as it reeled back. Mrs. Hutch began writhing on the floor, screams coming through in guttural barks as something tore at her throat from the inside. Her head didn't fly off nearly as violently as his did, but it stretched and tore instead, pain and fear in her eyes the whole time. It looked like even while she was feeling this, she was just going through a nightmare in her sleep, seeing death play out on an infinite scale in her mind. The centipede that emerged her was smaller than the other, and it didn't seem to have control over the body quite yet, maybe because it had appeared too early. Either way, Hutch was still bearing down on me, and so I swung again, this time retreating for the door, desperately to get to safety. Backing through the door nearly caused me to trip over the threshold, swinging once more at the terrifying bug as it lashed out at me. This time it caught my swing, twisting around the club in order to take it away from me, as arms raised to grab onto whatever of me it could reach. Stumbling had probably saved my life and giving me a slight distance to turn and start running down the steps, back over to my house. The clouds were still obscuring the sky above, fresh flashes of lightning beginning to go off above. Something was in the air, different than after any other storm, and the sound of screams began to reach me faintly over the still air. I wasn't the only one contending with what was going on, apparently. The door slammed behind me as I dove through, quickly deadbolting and locking it before drawing my blinds closed. It only took seconds for them to start banging on the door then, massive thuds landing on the solid wood. Way more power behind the hits than old Hutch ever had in him in his prime. At this point, I'm not going to mess around with whatever is happening. There was an old shotgun up in the attic in a case, left to me by Gramps when he had died a few years ago. The thing should still work, and if I remembered right, there was some ammo on hand in the same case that it came with. I don't think that I would have ever taken it out of the case otherwise. Thankfully, I could still remember all the shooting lessons that he gave me when I was a kid. A gun nut as he was, and it all began to come back. It wasn't much, just a pump action. 7 shells left in the ammo box that was in the case. It would be enough. I racked it, making sure there wasn't already a shell in the chamber before beginning to load them in. The banging was still going on at the door downstairs, but only one of them remained from the sound of it. It was cold up here in the attic. Stale air and insulation the only thing other than old boxes to keep me company. For a few minutes, I checked out, I think taking in the weight of everything happening today. Hell, I needed a moment just to prepare myself. Centipede head or not, this was still my neighbor for the last 4 years. He and his wife had invited me into their home plenty of times, fed me some great dinners, and now it was like some messed up Resident Evil game I was getting to live through. A skittering from the other side of the attic wall brought me back to the present. The thin wood and insulation was being pressed inward, something tapping along as it tried to find a way in from the other side. And probably the worst noise that I've ever heard too, like dozens of roaches just skittering across a wooden board. My skin was crawling. Hoisting the shotgun to my shoulder and aiming as the taps moved closer to the small vent in the wall leading to outside, I could see the shadow over the slats before legs began poking through them, working to stretch what it could and fit through, desperate to get to me. I kept working at the slats for a moment before one finally gave in, weathered from years. This house was old, so not too much of a surprise. But as soon as it gave, that was the reinforcement that the crawler needed, forcing its way further in and extending further through the vent, catching sight of me right as I pulled the trigger. It burst, guts and pieces of the shell flying everywhere while legs rained down. The remainder of it slumped over, dangling in the window as I made my way back through the attic door, still focusing my gun right on the damn thing. I got downstairs and I heard Mrs. Hutch still beating on the door, fistfalls getting louder as she seemingly gained more power behind the blows. I hesitated only momentarily, unlocking the deadbolt and stepping off to the side into the hallway beyond the door as it opened. Gun trained right at where eye level would be, or at least where I hoped it would be when she eventually entered the house. I almost shit my pants when this thing curled right around the doorway and stared into my soul before I got it together and I pulled the trigger. It burst, spattering guts all over me and making my ears ring at close range. Her body fell forward into the doorway, remains of the centipede skittering on the wooden floor as it went through death convulsions. I stepped out, partially to see if anyone else came out on hearing the noise and partially to see what had happened to Hutch's body. The answer was slumped on the lawn right by the wall. Centipede extended all the way up and through the attic vent. His body wasn't even able to fall completely, with the centipede holding it up, likely at the limit that it could stretch. Legs ran the entire length of it, making me shiver just by looking. And grabbing Mrs. Hutch's ankles, I pulled her back out onto the lawn, getting her out of the way so that I could close the door and relock it. Without the worry of what the hell it might do to me, I was able to look closer at it now, seeing that the centipede I had thought it was actually something much worse. Every segment of the thing was part of her spine, vertebrae growing over each other as it extended out of her stump neck. The end of it where the shotgun had blasted off looked like a frayed electrical wire, dozens of smaller strands of spinal cord unraveling in at the top. I shivered, unsure of what the hell was going on, but knowing that it wasn't something I wanted any part of. The door slammed behind me. This time though, I took a few other safety measures, pushing the recliner from the living room against the door frame to block it. I tried calling EMS to see if there was anyone that would even pick up, but sirens were blaring through the still air, mixing with far-off screams as more of the town began to contend with what was happening. The line was dead, much like I had expected, and all I could do was sigh, turning on the television and knowing that our dinky little town would never get the attention of the news. Sure enough, just more crap. A CEO arrested for money laundering, a reality star who was fighting back against the plastic surgery rumors, another war on the horizon. God, I was tired. I remember pacing my house until the sun went down, just hoping that I could hear something about what was happening in the world outside. Meanwhile, the cloud cover was still there, jolts of electricity lighting up the skyline every so often. The sirens eventually faded, but the screams didn't, only changing position as more of the town found the same thing that I did, just without as much luck surviving. Good news was that I had a decent amount of food. My grocery trip this morning was for a pretty spontaneous get-together. Not that I had heard from anyone since that first alert had popped up. If my friends were still out there, I hoped that they were still human at least. If not, who knows, maybe they made it out before things got bad. For once, I was kind of thankful for my bad sleep schedule. Insomnia was something that I've struggled with on and off my entire life, going whole nights without sleep at some points and just segueing into the next day. Not sleeping wasn't too much of a challenge for me, for a while anyway. Eventually, I just drew the blinds and tried to find something to do to keep my mind occupied, hoping that some alert would come through, telling me that everything was okay now and it was just some, I don't know. Nothing about this would fit into any natural explanation. Who knows, maybe it's still all a dream and I'm just asleep in bed, unaware that my alarm's gone off at this point. Wishful thinking, of course. Around 2 in the morning, someone set one of the houses down the street on fire. Despite the rainy conditions that had persisted since the first warning, the entire neighborhood quickly began to catch with no firefighters coming to get it under control. I was nearly dozing off in my living room, television on loud to hopefully keep me awake with the noise. I figured with where it was relative to the street outside, the sound wouldn't reach too terribly far, giving me some safety. I only realized the fire was going when I started to smell the smoke. Looking out my front window, it revealed that it had already jumped pretty far, only about 2 houses away from me. I was going to need to get the hell out of here or face the flames. I took everything that I could, a shotgun, a little cooler of food that I threw together that could easily be eaten without prep, some medical supplies from the bathroom. I loaded it all up in my car and I hit the road. It only took me about 5 minutes of driving to reach the edge of town and realize that things were far, far more messed up than I had originally believed. Cue my surprise when I'm driving along the highway going slower than normal, thankfully, because I wanted to be vigilant, and I run my car smack into a solid wall. I can't believe how fortunate I was to get out relatively unscathed, only a nasty bruise on my shoulder. In getting out of the car though, I thought that I had hit my head and gone to hell, because things just stopped making sense. The sky above was still sparking with electricity, blanketed by dark clouds against the night. It obscured the top of whatever wall was blocking my way, though I don't know if it was so much of a wall as more of a boundary. Not going to lie, I was feeling very Truman Show-esque. Or maybe Looney Tunes, considering how much of a weird fever dream this all was. The barrier had the road and landscape around town perfectly laid over it, not painted, I don't think, but kind of like a television. The clouds crackled with lightning in the distance, despite the distance not actually being there. Maybe it was all just a really thick window. I honestly couldn't tell with the darkness in my aching body. Whatever the hell it was, there was no way for me to get through. No staircase with a door and no hatch leading through. Not even a painted tunnel. My car in the meantime was, well, not doing great. The front end was accordion to hell, folding all over itself. It's a miracle that I was still alive. But honestly, the miracle made it feel more like I was trapped in this hell, damned to never escape. Well, I guess it's time to find another plan. To say things had played out weird since then is an understatement. You know, when you're in a nightmare, everything that happens is the most illogical shitstorm of a sequence. Like sometimes you'll just arrive at your next destination, something will appear out of nowhere. Nothing is off limits and anything could happen without the slightest hint of justification. That's how reality is moving right now. Genuinely, I don't even know where the hell I am right now. I'm holding up at a Wally's all the way on the other side of the town. My car is nowhere to be found, the shotgun is gone, and I'm sitting in the cheese aisle, pile driving through a deli tray like it's the last meal that I've ever had. It was like I was sleepwalking the entire time from when I noticed the barrier to now, sitting here stuffing my face. I nearly choked because of how taken aback I was. It reminded me of smoking some bad stuff back in my college days and finishing off a fifth of cheap vodka, total blackout. My watch said that it was around 2 in the afternoon on Monday now, hours lost and no idea where. Suddenly someone came around the corner into my aisle, making me stand and get ready to run. Whoa, you alright? A voice asked me. Female, probably around my age. Seemed familiar. Perry, you okay over there? When did I get here? I asked, realizing that my voice was shaking now. She hurried over, putting a hand on my shoulder. I recognize her now. Sarah, one of the cashier girls that works here during the weekends. About 5 hours ago. You've been pretty out of it though, saying stuff about a wall. Looks like you took a pretty nasty bump, she said. I was starting to notice my surroundings more at the dim grocery store lit by every other halogen bulb in the place. Dark overcast lights outside with the occasional lightning. Shit, it wasn't a dream. There's more of those things out there, yeah? I said, looking toward the nearest exit now. The deli windows were boarded up tight against the outside, while the front doors were barricaded by all the shopping carts that could be brought in. God, I can't remember anything. Hey, it's okay, Perry, it's all good. Come on over and talk to the others. We're trying to see if we can put anything together, she said, beckoning me back toward the stockroom. There were 4 others in there right now, all gathered in a little fort of pallets and supplies. One of them had set up with a knife, sharpening mop handles to use for defense. 2 guys, 2 girls, with Sarah and I joining to bring it to an even split between the 6 of us. You're looking rough, man, said one of the guys, the one not sharpening broom handles. I recognized him from somewhere, but the face just didn't quite reconcile with anyone that I could think of. You run into the spines. The centipede things, yeah, I said, nodding. The others all murmured in agreement. Apparently, we had all seen it at this point, surviving to get this far. I'm sorry, I just can't remember how I got here. Nothing makes sense. Yeah, it's starting to get that way for all of us. One of the girls, a blonde covered in tattoos, said. I was sitting safe in the truck stop off 90 just a few minutes ago and now I'm here. Not a clue how. You've been here for a few hours though, Sarah mentioned, looking at her. The other woman, a smaller brunette with glasses that made her look like the binoculars from Toy Story, nodded in agreement. Sarah looked to the steak guy next. What about you? Stock it up in case of vampires. He just kept on carving, sharpening one end of a mop handle that was already finished with a wicked point. Even then, he continued, his only words, I had a baby. That was enough for the rest of us to infer what must have happened. Not many humans spend most of their time sleeping, but a baby, Jesus, poor guy. And we left him to his steak sharpening after that. Have any other alerts come through? I asked, looking around at the others. I feel like there's something that I might have missed somewhere, some crucial event, but everything was a blur. Nothing about how I got here made sense, with everyone else sharing similar feelings. At this point, even if we could get out of town, would it be too late for us? Just the same stuff. Don't fall asleep. Stay awake no matter what. Isolate any who may fall asleep. Bullshit like that. The other man said. I still couldn't place where I knew him from, with big bushy eyebrows that met in the middle and a thick comb over on top of his head. I was visiting my grandpa at the senior center when things started going crazy. Old people napping everywhere. Heads just started popping off like champagne corks. Yeah, what the hell is going on with those? I asked, still trying to gather my bearings. I thought they were like bugs. I have a theory that something happens when we enter REM sleep. Binoculars mentioned. It awakens whatever makes the spine take over. So that's just their spine? Tattoo asked now, panic in her eyes. I swear the one that I saw still had eyes on the end of it, looking at me the entire time it came after, and then those freaky threads that were coming out of it. Don't let those touch you, I mentioned, recounting the story of the Hutch family. They all shuddered except for Steak, who just kept staring blankly at the sharp point that he was making. He stopped carving after a moment, staring at the nasty tip on the javelin that he had made. Hey man, you okay? Be careful with that. I'm sorry, Millie, he said, standing up and situating the point of the carved handle on his neck, tilting it a little ways inward. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing that you're about to see something awful yet you're too terrified to move in time. He situated both hands on the handle, pushing the point into his neck so hard that a little bead of blood began to ooze out, and he threw himself forward toward the ground. The other end of the handle didn't have a mop head on it, just metal and rubber for holding it in place. It hit the ground, catching on a crack in the concrete that stopped it suddenly, holding it upward at an angle. The force of him falling forward made the point immediately puncture right through the underside of his head, managing to poke far enough through to come out the other side of his skull. God, why? Why did he do that? Sarah was backing away from the body, screaming now, while I and the other strange man just jumped back and stopped, unsure of how to process what was going on. Binoculars and Tattoo were holding each other, both in tears. He's dead. Steak let out a half gurgle, almost a comical noise as if he was reassuring us that he was still somehow kicking. His feet staggered forward a couple of steps, quickly beginning to slip in the blood pooling around him. I motioned for everyone to leave the stockroom, heading back into the main store and away from the horror in front of us. Is it bad if I'm jealous of him? Honestly, at the rate this is playing out, taking myself out doesn't seem like the worst option there is. It's better than nodding off and having my spine rip out anyway. Exhaustion began setting in harder around then, with my irritability immediately beginning to turn up as my tiredness had mounted. Tattoo and binoculars were still crying. Strange Face wandered off to do his own thing, though I'm not sure what that involved. Sarah was near catatonic at this point, staring off into blank space behind her register, standing at attention like she was waiting for items to come down the line. The crying began to get on my nerves, sending me elsewhere to try and find something else to keep my mind busy. It started to get dark outside, lightning still popping through the clouds on occasion, when I found a small pocket radio on one of the shelves in the back. I swear as I was walking around back there, Steak was following my every move though. At some point I'm pretty sure that I saw him swivel around in his pole, trying to get a better look at what I was doing. When I checked him though, he had no pulse, eyes glazed over in death. Nonetheless, the feeling persisted. It took me a minute to find batteries for the radio, but turning it on got me nothing. Just static on every station, blaring out with the same dull drone. I was about to give up when it suddenly shifted, a monotone voice coming over the tinny speaker. "Stay awake until the alert is lifted. Thank you. Attention, collective personnel are on site to assess the situation. If you have found yourself in a Class 4 night terror, please do not be alarmed. Stay where you are, find the nearest weapon, and defend yourself. Please stay awake until the alert is lifted. Thank you." It cut off after that, and I shook my head. My eyes were beginning to burn from the lack of sleep, drying out something terrible. I pushed the radio aside, not turning it off completely, but zoning out into a daydream for a moment. "Attention, collective personnel are on site to assess the situation. If you have found yourself in a Class 4 night terror, please do not be alarmed. Stay where you are, find the nearest weapon. Kill yourself." My blood ran cold, hearing the new deviation on the instructions. A scream finished freezing it over at glacial temperatures only seconds later. From near the registers, a woman screamed, but also, oh God, the skittering, click-clack sound of the spines moving. Somebody fell asleep. Tattoo was the one. Her head was grotesquely stuck in the rafters of the grocery store, empty eye sockets staring down at us as our problems unfolded below. It was a macabre audience, but the spine bursting forth from her neck began to spew threads almost too thin for the eye to see. Little nerves spread through the air, feeling for anything near that they could latch onto. The spine just kept rising out of her, making me half expect to see her body collapse without it to hold everything to a center. The nerves grabbed onto binoculars and Sarah, bringing the two women in closer as they got a hold. Whatever it used to knock them out was effective though, because almost immediately it looked like they fell asleep. Within moments, their heads began to tear off, spines elongating out of the stumps to further stretch their necks until they had disconnected with loud pops. The white bone was covered in blood and viscera, with the vertebrae clacking together, appearing as spindly legs as parts of bone stretched and elongated. The strange man came walking out of the aisles nearby now, hands outstretched in reverence to the three-turned woman in front of him. He began to walk in closer, uncaring of the nerves reaching through the quickly unraveling spines. Their fibers twisted and fanned out around them, floating ever so close to him without touching as he seemed to dance in between them. "Yes, embrace your exhaustion. Delicious," he said, doing one of the grossest things that I had ever seen in my life. He was licking the viscera off the contracting spines as they wriggled, taking in their taste and relishing it. I just ran, and I didn't stop. I burst through the back door of the market and I kept on running. Suddenly, I'm out on Main Street, small buildings on every side. It's deserted, quiet with nobody else out there but me. The thunder rumbles overhead as more purple and green lightning crack through the clouds. A burst of static comes through the radio in my right hand. I didn't even realize it until I grabbed it. The same warning was playing, now with the new ending running every time. Checking my watch revealed that I had lost another day and a half somewhere along the way. Where, who the hell knows? I just arrived here, I guess. I don't even remember where I was trying to go in the first place. A strap digs into my neck as I turn around, looking to see if there's any place to find safety. The shotgun. Holy shit, the shotgun is slung over my back. How did I get it back? Did I make the trip back to my car and then come back to the center of town? That didn't matter then. I could hear them, hundreds of them. There was just the skittering sounds of tiny jagged feet on the pavement all around me. The clickety-clack of vertebrae as they smacked and scraped past each other. I could see the nerves flying into the sky above before they all even got here. Massive spinal columns extending out of every single body from a bloody stump where the neck should be. There was a small flower shop to my right on the road that I tried to duck into, but I couldn't get through the door. Even worse, when I looked at the door to see if I could break the glass, I realized that it wasn't even glass. It was fake. Just a picture on a wall showing a shop interior. A fake handle sticking out to fool idiots like me looking for safety. Oh, Perry, you must be tired. The strange man was back again, suddenly right in the middle of the crossed roads, looking right at me. His bushy eyebrows were furrowed, a small, buck-toothed smile breaking through his lips. God, why did he seem so familiar but so terror-inducing? Everything about him just looked uncanny, off by the slightest bit. An imperfect imperfection of a human. Oh, just take a little nap. We'll make sure that nobody bothers you. What in the hell are you, man? What's going on? I asked, tears breaking through my voice. I was hoping to play with the rest of you more, you know. I mean, I'd been starved, don't get me wrong. But I wanted to have some fun with all of you. He was gleeful at this point. I thought you said that your grandpa turned. Was that a lie? I asked now, trying to stall it while I figured something out. Anything. Behind the dozens of spines that were lined up on each street, blocking the way out, I noticed that same solid backdrop. We were stuck here in the scene of a nightmare. No way in or out. This guy must be the one causing it. Was it a lie? It did happen just like all nightmares happen. Every little synapses firing in your brain is a very real situation. Just one that only you ever experience. What happened to you in one person's dream might be different than what really happens to you. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. All this cryptic shit was just making me more frustrated, already irritable from the lack of sleep. The nerves from all those spines kept inching closer, moving in toward me. There wasn't any way out of here. Attention, collective personnel are on site to assess the situation. If you found yourself on a Class 4 night terror, please do not be alarmed. Stay where you are and find the nearest weapon. Kill yourself. The radio cut through blaring static in that same message. The strange man rolled his eyes, giving a loud groan. Those assholes. You know, they've kept me locked up for decades now. No wonder I've been able to eat so much. It's been forever since my last good meal. He began again. I pulled the shotgun off my back, hefting it at my shoulder and aiming it at him. He stopped, a look of surprise on his face as he walked closer, examining the shotgun from top to bottom before literally putting his eye to the barrel. Bang! My finger wasn't even on the trigger, but it still fired, blowing his brains out right in front of me. The entire top right half of his face was gone, back of the head included, and what was left of his mangled mouth was laughing maniacally. "You can't kill me on my home turf, Perry. Come on, be a good sport," he shouted as I fell back in fear, tasting the brain matter that had splattered upon the gun going off. It was everywhere, all over me, all over the street. There was too much of it to even make sense of from the wound. Too much for the short time that it had been open. And no head would have that many brains in it, right? They began piling on the street, blood pooling and running off into a sewer drain at the corner. Nerves kept coming closer, feeling their way toward me as the strange man laughed once more.
"If you're hearing this, please end yourself before it's too late."
The static bursted through to another voice, less monotone and more human now. His look went from amused to pissed off. "Oh, come on, don't ruin more of my fun," he said, laughing once more as he made a finger gun at the radio going pew and blasting it to smithereens. "Those stuffy old geezers don't know what they're talking about anyway. Come on, Perry, you're the last one still here, last one standing, buddy. You survived this far, so what are you gonna do now?" The city around me faded away and I was suddenly in the middle of a raucous theme park, people bustling around in every direction. The strange man appeared wearing mascot ears and eating a comically large cotton candy. "Are you gonna go to Disney? Have yourself a magical time," he said. The scene dropped out as soon as it came into view, water now flooding in from every direction, pouring over the edges of some invisible tank to sweep me away. I desperately reached for something to keep my balance before feeling sand under my feet, solid ground once again. He appeared once more in comical tourist garb and a huge camera slung around his neck. He pushed the button on it, causing the flash to blind me, closing my eyes against the madness happening. An island vacation, maybe. Rest and rejuvenate. Flames burst to life everywhere, the smell of sulfur stinging at my nostrils. The bright light that blinded me only moments ago was replaced by a molten fire, billowing from the ground below my feet. The heat was more intense than anything I had ever felt. Or maybe you just let me drag your poor soul down to hell, huh? How about that, Perry? His laughter echoed in every direction around me, making me want to claw my ears out. My sanity was slipping with every passing second, exhaustion tugging at my last shreds. Meanwhile, he fluttered around me like some demon, spewing hate and vitriol at me from every direction. "No, stop," I said, flipping over the shotgun and putting the barrel in my own mouth. I could hear him realize what I was doing before I even knew it, but it was too late to stop me. I pulled the trigger, feeling the explosion rip at the back of my throat in excruciating detail. But I was still alive. Everything hurt, my entire skull felt hot, and my eardrums were ruptured. But I was still alive. "You idiot," I could hear him, faintly through the dull throbbing of blood in my ears. I tried to talk back, but felt my jaw just fall away, unsupported by the muscle. Did I mess up that bad? "You aim too low, give me that." He went to snatch the shotgun away from me before I could try again, but I was dedicated and determined even. I hoisted myself back, tilting my head and holding it to the roof of my mouth. It probably looked like I was trying to play a dang shotgun saxophone the way that I was moving, but I needed the momentum. Taking a page out of Steak's book, I threw myself forward, pumping the shotgun as I started moving, and I slammed the butt of the weapon into the hard rock at my feet. I felt it fire off one more time, successfully blasting my skull apart into a billion little fragments. He screamed at me as the hell around me faded to black, a sweet abyss of death. I almost choked, sitting up, gasping for air and feeling the cold tile under me as I scrambled to stand and run. Somebody pushed me back on the floor, shining a light into my eyes and holding them open. "Clear, he's clear," they shouted. "Give me a stretcher, the last one made it back." They were dressed in a nice suit, hair perfectly styled short. I looked up at the ceiling above me as hot bile burned in my throat, threatening to push its way up and out. Another man in a suit ran by, bringing a small medical kit with him. He began checking on me, taking blood pressure, vitals, anything that he could. "Where am I?" I asked, choking back the bile. "Wally's Grocer in Hazelwood, Georgia," the first agent that had shouted told me. "Do you remember what happened to you, sir?" "How did I get back here?" I asked, still unsure if I was going by the weird nightmare logic or actually got here in a real way. "You've been here for a few days, sir. Tell me, did you see this person during your ordeal?" He held up a rough sketch, showing a man with bushy eyebrows, a thick comb-over, and buck-tooth smile. The strange man who was pulling all the strings. All I could do was nod, still holding bile back. God, I was starving. A few days. The agent took my confirmation, beginning to talk into a monitor. "We have confirmation of a nocturne in the area. Please begin cleanse protocol," they said, getting an affirmative over the radio. The medical guy started to help me up and guiding me toward the door of the grocery store. We stepped out into bright sunlight, almost blinding me as I tried to adjust to it. When I finally did, the sight that met me was something that made me almost shut back down. Body bags lined up down the central street in town. Some fine, others with long, thick spinal cords stretched with vertebrae into small legs curling at the edge. No room to zip the bag around them. Oh my God. I fainted then and there, losing consciousness again. The next thing that I knew, I woke up in a hospital room, unsure of what was going on. The people who brought me here have been in and out, asking me every damn question imaginable, cross-referencing others that had talked to me and doing an entire investigation. From what one told me, this was a contained event, though most of Hazelwood was, well, dead. 3 days and a nightmare and the town collapsed, everyone giving in to their exhaustion while that thing preyed on them. What a way to go. I saw Steak walking through the hallway outside my door earlier today. He was carrying a little bundle, talking to it and singing its songs. I noticed on one of his passes that a hand was sticking up from the bundle. Plastic, lifeless, but not to him. The nightmare was only beginning for him. No matter how much I've tried to get sleep since coming here, it just doesn't last for long. The night terrors were rough, the spines haunting me through any dream, no matter how good it starts. They said they're going to prescribe something for a dreamless sleep tonight. I hope it works. It was 10:31 when my phone buzzed. Emergency alert. Do not enter underground structures such as basements. Stay above ground until the all clear. My husband looked up from his phone and stared at me. Did you just get a... Yeah. That's creepy, I said, glancing at the stairs. Our kid had fallen asleep for the night about an hour ago. What do you think's going on? I don't know, he replied. Could it be like a gas leak? Radon or something? We had had a radon pump in our basement since we had moved here. Maybe there was some weird influx of it or something. I ran up the stairs to check on our 5-year-old daughter as Luke flicked on the TV. And Grace was sleeping peacefully, her blanket wrapped around her. I made sure that she was breathing, comfortable, totally fine before heading back downstairs. When I did, Luke was glued to the TV, which said the same thing. A black screen, pixelated white letters, blocky colors jittering along the top and bottom of the screen. Emergency alert. Do not enter underground structures. Maybe we should get out of here, I said. But it's late and Grace has school tomorrow. Yeah, so? We'll miss school. We can go to my mom's. Luke crossed his arms and stared at the TV. He then flicked to CNN and other news channels, but whatever was happening here must have been local, because it was the same political drivel re-airing from earlier in the day. There is not a blip of the emergency alert anywhere except the local news channel. I pulled out my phone and did some Google searches. Nothing came up. So I shot off a text to Lacey, the mom of one of Grace's friends, who lived in the next development over. We had only lived here since the school year had started, so it's not like I had a whole network of people to ask. She didn't respond. I think we should, I said, grabbing a duffel bag out of the closet. What about work? Don't you work remotely on Mondays anyway? Yeah, but... I walked over to our basement door. The chain was latched. I hurried into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out some postal tape. What are you doing? If it's radon or something, I don't want that stuff all in our house, I said, crouching along the bottom and taping the crack under the door. I think that they would evacuate us if that were the case. I looked up at him as I yanked another long piece of tape off the roll. Okay, so what do you think it is? He shrugged. When I had taped all the cracks, I brought the duffel bag upstairs, filled it with a few random outfits for me and Grace, along with my laptop and a few of her favorite dolls. And then I grabbed the cooler and loaded our leftover pasta and yogurts into it. Within 10 minutes, I was ready to go out the door. I'll pack up the car. Can you go and grab Grace? I asked. Luke went upstairs. I walked down the driveway, weighed down with bags. It was a chilly and clear night. Stars twinkled high above me. The street was exceedingly quiet, the tall, scraggly pines of the surrounding pine barrens stretching up to the sky. I heard the echo of a dog barking somewhere. If everybody got the alert, wouldn't there be more people deciding to leave? I glanced at the house across the street. It was completely dark except for the light above the garage that flicked on when I came out of the house. I opened the back hatch and threw our stuff in. Luke came out after, carrying Grace, wrapped in blankets. She blinked sleepily. I strapped her in and Luke grabbed some stuff, and then we were pulling out of the driveway on the road to my mom's house an hour away. She fell back asleep. I told Luke, watching her face flick into view with the light of the passing street lamps. Good. My phone buzzed. I reached for it. Emergency alert. Your phone's GPS indicates that you're leaving city limits. We do not recommend evacuating. Please return home and stay above ground. What the heck? I whispered. What? Luke asked. There's another alert. It's saying it knows that we're leaving. It's tracking our GPS and it's telling us to stay. Luke glanced at my phone. Wait, seriously? Yeah. That data's supposed to be private, he said. Isn't it? I would think so unless, I don't know, maybe there's some emergency protocols that allow the FBI to access it or something. We fell into uncomfortable silence. Luke clicked on the turn signal and switched lanes. You don't want me to turn around, right? He asked quietly. I glanced down at my phone. No, I don't. The highway was empty, not a single car in sight. That made me uneasy. I mean, surely other people would be evacuating, unless they were all actually obeying the second message. But who even trusts the government these days? I did another Google search. No results popped up. I refreshed over and over again. Wouldn't something be on the internet by now? We were 5 miles out of town now. I should be relieved, but I wasn't. I leaned against the window. The cold glass pressed against my forehead. The pine trees flashed by, skinny and tilted, and then gave way to a charred and barren patch of forest. Both sides of the highway were burnt to the ground. I had read somewhere that some pine cones only opened in extreme temperatures, like from a wildfire. Fires and regrowth were part of the cycle here, part of the ecosystem, in flux between death and rebirth like a phoenix. My phone buzzed, and my heart dropped, but it wasn't an alert. It was a text from Lacey. Only 2 words. What alert? My fingers raced across the screen. Didn't you get an emergency alert saying to stay above ground? No. Lacey didn't get an alert, I said. Luke paused. What? What if the alerts were only sent to our phones? I asked, my voice shaking. I glanced back at Grace, still peacefully asleep, head lolling softly from each bump of the car. Luke shook his head. That's crazy. Nobody can send messages like that. Just the government or whatever. What if it's a trap? My voice shook harder. What if the only safe place was our basement? That's just your OCD talking, he said softly and emphatically. We're doing the right thing. There's something weird going on in town, like a gas leak, and we got out. That's obviously the safest thing to do. I stared out at the charred pines. There were a few that hadn't burnt up, standing tall and stilted in the darkness. I stared out at them, wondering why they were spared. One of them moved. What the? The car screeched to a stop. My body lurched forward, the seatbelt locked, keeping my head from hitting the dash. Sorry, that deer just... His voice died in his throat. We both stared at the lower legs of something illuminated in the headlights. Thin and spindly, but definitely not a deer's. They ended in twisted toes, not hooves, and extended several feet up into the darkness. Silhouetted against the starry sky beyond the reach of our headlights, I could see something. Something tall and spindly, skeletal. Crisscrossing lines of bones or sticks or something else entirely. As I stared at it, as it stared at me, a wave of dizziness washed through me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Weight pressed down on my head, and immense pressure bearing down on me. Thwack! Something at the side of the car with incredible force. The entire car rocked on its wheels. I screamed. Thwack! A mess of lines, bones, sticks outside my window. Empty air between them, the stars and the pines rippling strangely behind it. Luke stomped down on the accelerator. The car shot forward. We swerved around the thing and then past the burnt section of forest and continued down the dark and twisting highway. My phone buzzed. Emergency alert. All clear. Please return home immediately. We got to my mom's house around midnight, a squat brick ranch on a residential road. I glanced warily at the pines behind her house stretching up to the sky before picking up Grace and carrying her inside. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for us, her fingers wrapped against the mug in her hand. The entire house smelled like that familiar mix of coffee and dust. I started for the guest bedroom, and then I got a better idea. The ranch had a lower level that was half underground. It had been finished into an office, but there was a couch down there. I could have Grace sleep on the couch and we would sleep on the floor. Where are you going? Mom was standing behind me, eyebrow raised, as I undid the chain lock to the basement floor. I think we're going to sleep down there. No, you're not. It's all dusty down there. I haven't cleaned for ages. There could even be mice and we're sleeping down there. Those alerts were probably just a prank, she continued, or a glitch or something. Besides, you're like an hour away now. I had only told my mom about the alerts. I didn't tell her about the thing in the woods. My mom was not a supernatural person. She would definitely chalk it up to a trick of the light or something. Casper himself could be floating in front of her face and she would call it a trick of the light. Oh, you're being ridiculous, she continued. You know, this reminds me of that time that you taped up the door to the attic. You remember that? When the exterminator had found a bat up there, you were worried that there were more with rabies, and they could flatten themselves through the cracks between the door and the ceiling and bite you while you're sleeping. You don't feel the bites when you're sleeping, I growled back. A lot of people have gotten rabies from bats in their houses, and they can squeeze through really tiny places. My point is, she interrupted, it's unsanitary down there. And Grace was getting incredibly heavy in my arms. I glanced at Luke, who was just standing in the doorway wide-eyed, like he had walked in on a gunfight. And then I pulled the chain lock and yanked the door open. Kate, Mom said warningly. Halfway down the stairs, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I got Grace settled on the couch and then pulled it out. Emergency alert. Your phone's GPS indicates that you have stopped in redacted New Jersey. Disobeying an emergency alert is a federal offense. Please return home and stay above ground. I lifted my phone to show Luke, who was coming down behind me. His face looked ghastly pale in the white light. Mom was right behind him and craned her neck to read the alert too. Oh, that's BS, she said. It's not a federal offense, it's a state offense. And that would be an evacuation order like for a hurricane or something. She shook her head. You know what this sounds like? One of those scammers. I got a call from someone claiming to be my grandson. It's not a scam, Luke interrupted without elaborating. And then he worked in silence, putting the blanket over Grace and getting her comfortable. I flicked on the light and checked for mouse droppings, but I didn't see any. I'll get the rest of our stuff, he said, leaving my mom and I alone. Her expression softened as she looked down at Grace, at her perfect little face. Do you need anything else? No, I don't think so. She nodded and went back upstairs. I glanced around. The office stuff was in the leftmost corner, the desk covered with papers and a single photo of my dad. He had been gone for 7 years now, and it seemed like every year, more and more of his stuff got tucked away, moved downstairs, shoved into storage. I swallowed down the feeling and glanced around the rest of the room. The door next to the desk led to the unfinished storage area. On the other end of the basement was a sliding glass door that led out into the backyard. I didn't like that at all. We were technically underground where we stood, but the rightmost corner with the door was above ground. Did that mean that we were still vulnerable? Those things couldn't fit through a glass door, I thought, but they couldn't fit through a normal door either, and apparently we wouldn't have been safe in our own home. I stared out the glass door, afraid that I might see one of them out there. Maybe this was a bad idea to stay here. We were an hour away, sure, but the pines were still right at our door. Not officially the Pine Barrens, but the surrounding Pinelands ecosystem, which was almost the same thing. If those things came from the Barrens, they were only in the burned areas, I reminded myself. I imagined a pine cone spiraling in midair, petals opening as fire raged around it, and skeletons made of sticks prying their way out of the thing, creeping along the ground and stretching and growing towards the sky. Were there any maps of the burned areas? I pulled up Google Maps looking for the blackened areas, but the information would be out of date, wouldn't it? My phone buzzed. I expected another alert, but it was a text from Lacey instead. My friend Rochelle got the same alert that you did, by the way. Super weird. My heart dropped. And did Rochelle, whoever she was, listen to it? Tell her not to listen to the alert, I started typing. It's a trap. And then I realized how unhinged that sounded. I didn't even know Lacey that well. I thought for a second and then typed a new message. Can you give me your number? I want to ask her about it. It's pretty weird that it targeted both of us and no one else. Sure, let me ask her, was the reply. As I waited, Luke came back down the stairs carrying our stuff, computer cords and stuff nearly falling out of his arms. Someone else got the alert, I whispered. One of Lacey's friends. Really? Yeah, I asked for her number. A minute later, the number came in. I dialed it immediately. On the third ring, she picked up.
Hello?
Hi, this is, Kate, Lacey's friend. I started awkwardly. We got the emergency alert too, but we think that it's a trap. There's something off about it. A pause.
But it came from the government. How could it be a trap?
It seems like nobody else is getting it. When alerts are sent out like that, they're sent to all the phones in a certain location. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know, it's weird. Well, we were just about to go to bed here, so I'd better go.
Wait, I think the basement is safe and everything else isn't, I said quickly. I think someone's trying to lure people into staying above ground.
Okay, maybe,
she said unconvincingly.
Look, I gotta go, sorry.
A few seconds later, the call ended. Oh crap. She didn't believe me, I said, looking up at Luke, my lip trembling. She and her kids and her family, they're all going to. Hey, you tried, he said, wrapping his arms around me. That's the best you can do. I couldn't help it. I cried as we lay on a blanket on the floor and got ready to sleep next to Grace. I looked down at her perfect little face and then Luke and I snuggled under the blankets together. Hey, kiddo. I woke up with a start. For a second, I thought I was in my own bed, but then the roughness of the carpet, the aching in my back, it brought me back to reality. My father's voice, rough and warm, lingered from the dream. I could almost feel his arms around me, the summer sunlight beating down on us as we played at the creek behind the house. I rolled over to check on Grace. Her eyes were wide open. She was staring behind me, at the sliding glass door. Slowly, she raised a hand and pointed over my shoulder. I turned around. There was something twisting and turning, contorting itself, trying to get in through the sliding glass door like a dog through a cat door. It did it silently except for a low clicking sound, like the popping of joints. All the blood drained from my face. Dark, sinewy legs like spider legs, twisting and turning in the moonlight, squeezing itself ever so slowly through the hole that it made. I now saw the shattered glass scattering the floor. I grabbed Luke and shook him. Luke! The thing fell still. I couldn't see eyes or a face, but I felt it in my gut. It was staring at me. Dizziness swept over me. I stumbled forward, losing my balance. It was like I was standing on the deck of a boat. The ground seemed to shift and tilt underneath me. I just wanted to lie down until the world stopped turning. No, I screamed internally. You can't let that thing get Grace. I glanced around the room, looking for something that could be used as a weapon. Anything. Go in there, I said to Grace, pointing to the storage room, or at least I thought I was. Everything was tilting and moving around me. Go, hide. I stumbled forward, but all the colors were bleeding together now. Everything was hazy as a dream. My father was standing in front of me, standing there in the basement. but his face was all wrong. His eye drooped out of his socket, like something had squeezed his skull. His grin was crooked. "Hey, kiddo," he said in a voice that sounded off-key. Nausea filled me and I started vomiting. Warm liquid down my shirt, splashing on my feet. My dad, not my dad, stood tilted, like gravity had suddenly changed. One arm was too long and hung limply from its socket. "I miss you so much." "Stop, please stop." "Come with me. We can be a family again." "Stop." "I never got to meet Grace. Wouldn't it be so wonderful for me to finally meet her?" The world tilted and shifted. I stared at my father, his left eye drooping like jelly. His crooked smile, his gaunt face, his limp arms. I opened my mouth. Hot pain shot up my shoulder. I fell to my knees instantly. I tried to cry out to say stop again, to tell Grace to run for her life, but all that came out was a scream of pain, and another and another. When I finally opened my eyes, the world had stopped tilting. Luke was dragging me across the floor back from the glass window. Grace was peeking out of the storage area, terrified. I touched my shoulder, stinging with pain. My fingers came away red. "It bit me. I'm dying." "What?" My phone began to ring. Shaking all over, I reached into my pocket and pulled it out. I recognized the number. It was Rochelle.
"You're right,"
she said breathlessly, no preamble. "What?" I asked, my voice hoarse.
"About the alert. My husband, he has some friends who work with the cell phones and stuff, and
She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice.
they trace the signal. It's not coming from the government or the town hall or whatever.
I chewed my lip and held my breath.
It's coming from the middle of the woods."
The hospital was mostly empty. Quiet, dark, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were a sickly shade of seafoam green. The doctor, a tall, thin man in his 60s, didn't seem to believe my story, but he admitted me for observation anyway. My mom was staying at her friend's house with Grace in their non-walkout basement. I didn't want to leave her. I wanted her right here with me, but the hospital was above ground, and someone needed to treat my wound before I bled to death. Luke left me for a moment to use the bathroom. I closed my eyes, not intending to sleep, but I was so tired and the bite was now only a dull throbbing pain. I drifted in and out of consciousness until I heard two voices in the room. I snapped my eyes open for a moment to see the doctor and a nurse hovering over me. They were talking softly to each other, looking concerned. I quickly shut my eyes again, pretending to be asleep. I caught a bit of their conversation. "It's just like that man," the nurse whispered. "The one that was admitted last night. John something." A pause. "I know. What do you think this is?" "I don't know, Rita. I really don't." "Do you think that we should give her a diazepam, preventatively?" the nurse asked. "The other one, he screams so much." The family will ask questions. There's no reason for her to be on diazepam for an animal bite." "Well, they'll ask questions when she's dead, too," the nurse snapped back. "The least we can do is make her comfortable." "Shh." "Oh, God." I didn't open my eyes, but I had jumped when the nurse said dead. I now could feel both of them looking at me, their eyes boring through my closed lids. "Let's talk somewhere else," the doctor said. Hurried footsteps on tile, and then nothing. I opened my eyes. I'm going to die." I don't know how long I lay there wallowing in my own misery, but footsteps jolted me awake. Luke was walking back in. "How's the pain now?" "Bad." I told him what I had overheard, my voice quivering. "That doesn't mean anything," he said, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "We're going to get you out of here and everything's going to go back to normal. The mayor or whatever will release some statement about a faulty alert system, and stop. He looked at me warily but shut up. The two of us sat in silence. A few times Luke opened his mouth looking like he was going to say something but then quickly shut it again. Footsteps pattered by outside in the hallway. The tinny sounds of the TV droned on in the corner. "I'm going to call Rochelle," I told him. The line rang 3 times before she picked up. I told her everything about the bite, about the things that I saw. I was afraid of sounding crazy, but when I had finally finished, she sounded like she was crying on the other end.
"I saw my baby,"
she said in a low tone, barely above a whisper.
I had a miscarriage at 14 weeks, and I saw this little basket with a tiny pink thing bundled up inside, and I heard her cry.
Her voice broke.
I knew it wasn't real, but I still went toward it, before Ravi pulled me back."
"I'm so sorry," I said, the phone trembling in my hands.
"Thank you."
"But it didn't hurt you, right? Bite you or claw you?"
"No, I don't think so."
The silence stretched out between us. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Just run from it forever?"
"I've been talking to someone who knows about this more than we do. Maybe I should come see you. What hospital are you at?"
She told me that you would be there in an hour. Rochelle was a short, thin woman with brown skin and thick-framed glasses. She wore a t-shirt with some sort of video game reference on it and faded jeans. As she hurried in, she was wringing her hands, twisting them over and over again. Following after her was a woman in her 50s. Her salt and pepper hair was cropped short and her skin was deathly pale, like she had never seen the sun. "This is Jamie," Rochelle said, gesturing to the older woman. "She's a professor and specializes in this kind of stuff. I've been talking to her for the past few hours and she wanted to see you. This kind of stuff." The woman abruptly sat down and leaned in towards me, like I was some kind of specimen that she was eager to examine. "You know what's going on here?" I asked, as she stared at my shoulder in a way that made me extremely uncomfortable. "Well, yes, sort of. Have you ever heard of something called speculative evolution?" "No," I replied. "Okay. It's reconstructing what kinds of creatures would evolve under different circumstances. Maybe an amphibian would evolve to have wings like a bat, for example, if insects didn't hover around ponds. You see what I mean?" I guess. We also try to construct what animals might look like millions of years from now, or humans. What kind of things will evolve under the pressure of modern humanity, modern technology? There's already some of it happening. The bedbugs in New York City are hundreds of times more resistant to pesticides than the ones in Florida are. And deer are more skittish than they were 10 years ago because cars kept hitting them. Okay. I had no idea where she was going with this. "You haven't seen that image of what humans would look like if they were evolved to survive car crashes. The man has like no neck and lots of fat to cushion the impact." "No?" "Okay," she shook her head. "The point is, some people in this field believe that at some point, creatures would evolve abilities that mimic technology, like birds that look like drones or bats that can sense electromagnetic fields. Who's to say this thing that you and Rochelle have described hasn't evolved the ability to send out radio signals, hack our entire mobile system?" "Okay, that's ridiculous," Luke interjected. "So what, this creature is like texting, in English?" "Oh, no, nothing like that. States, local governments, they often have pre-programmed emergency messages, like a protocol for hurricanes, earthquakes, nuclear threats, etc. This thing had just hacked a signal to send a particular protocol. Same thing with Rochelle," she said, looking sympathetically at her. "We're all sending little electromagnetic signals in our brains all the time, neural impulses.
Sharks, 400 million year old living fossils can detect them. These things, they can hack them. So when I saw my dad, I glanced at Luke. That thing was hacking my brain signals. Jamie nodded. Oh, it's a little more complicated than that. I believe this thing sends out a chemical in the air too, at close range that messes with some neurotransmitters. But essentially, yes.
Okay, but why is the basement safe then? Because it's too big for them to get down there, Luke asked.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Jamie replied with a big, victorious smile on her face, like she was just about to tell us the secret to the universe. They chose that emergency protocol with the basement because their abilities don't work if you're underground, just how your phone reception goes out when you're underground.
A heavy silence filled the room. Luke and I looked at each other. For one, this sounded pretty out there. Conspiracy theory level stuff. More unbelievable than Roswell. On the other hand, nothing that I had experienced in the past 24 hours had made sense.
How do you know all of this? I asked. This isn't the first time that it's happened, she replied, her face grim. Almost 10 years ago, the same thing happened out by Woodland, on the border of Wharton State Forest. I studied it then too, but there weren't as many of them.
Okay, but the text didn't get sent to everyone, Luke said. Only us and Rochelle so far that we know of.
Right, so these things, I call them stickmen by the way. They only target people with overactive imaginations. People who send out really clear and strong brain signals. It's easier for them to find you and it's easier for them to hack your brain. They're not actually producing the image you see of your deceased loved ones or whatever. They're just knocking it loose from your memory, from something that you've imagined. If you've imagined your kid disappearing 1,000 times because you have anxiety or OCD, that makes it all the easier for them to use it against you and lure you in. And of course, there's more for them to eat. More for them to eat. Yeah, they eat brains. I mentioned that, didn't I? More awkward, heavy, suffocating silence.
Kate said that she heard the doctor saying she's going to die, he said in a soft voice. Is that true? Jamie glanced at me but stayed silent. Rochelle jumped in, her voice full of heartache. Jamie told me that if one bites you, it's linked to you. It will follow you and end you. It'll show you your worst nightmares first. Jamie interjected, absolutely unable to read the room. Show you everything you fear. But when it starts showing you yourself in these waking nightmares, that usually means you only have a day left. I swallowed a wave of nausea, and then I started getting out of the hospital bed. I needed to get out of here, away from Jamie's stare, Luke's concern, and just a moment of silence. Maybe I would get a Coke from the vending machine, not even a diet one. I hadn't had a full sugar one in ages. I tried to keep out the memory of my dad before me in my mom's basement. I had imagined him saying those exact words. When I was at my lowest point years ago, when a flicker of suicide showed itself in an ocean of postpartum depression, and that stickman or whatever has used it against me. Another wave of nausea. I pushed towards the door. Wait, Rochelle said, standing up and reaching for my arm. I'll be right back, I snapped. I made my way down the empty hospital hallway, beeping machines and echoing footsteps in the distance. Tears pricked my eyes. I kept going, making a left and then a right, following the signs for the vending machines. My feet shuffled along the ground, taking me there slowly, ever so slowly. Kate, stop. I turned to see Luke coming after me. He stopped 6 feet away, trying to give me space. I just need a minute, I replied, my voice shaky. No, it's not that. Your mom just texted me and we have to go. Grace. His voice broke, and my heart broke with it.
What happened?" "She fell," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's not awake. They're rushing her to the hospital." "To the hospital? You mean here? They're taking her here?" I asked frantically. "They're taking her to the hospital," he repeated. Something twinged inside me. That doesn't make sense. That's not an answer. I looked down. No. On the floor, something black, slick and wet, on the green linoleum floor. A tendril like a long umbilical cord attached to Luke's foot and leading down the hallway. I felt dizzy. The world started to tilt. "Kate!" I turned around to see Luke behind me, frozen, eyes wide. I looked back. The other Luke was no longer standing there. It was me. I was staring at my own face. I wished that I could say it looked different, one eye popping out, skin all blistered and pink, but it wasn't. It looked exactly like me, like looking in a mirror. I looked down. Other me was holding a pillow. She held my gaze for a second and then looked down at the floor. I followed her gaze. Grace was lying at my feet, eyes closed, hands resting neatly under her head, fast asleep. No, no. I knew this intrusive thought. I knew how it ended. It's not real, it's not real. I turned and ran back down the hallway, reaching for Luke's hand. Rustling behind me, I couldn't look back. I couldn't. Luke pulled me into the room and I followed, breathless. We have to get underground, it's here. Rochelle and Jamie looked at me, and then they looked at the floor. For a second, I thought I was going to see my worst nightmare, but instead, I looked down to see blood dripping off my arm, seeping through my shirt, traveling in wet, soaky rivulets, dripping to the floor. Jamie shot up and walked over to me. Gently, she pushed back the cloth of my shirt, exposing the wound at my shoulder. Necrotic tissue, she whispered. She shook her head sadly. It's begun. I can't die. I can't. My shoulder pulsed with pain. I continued running down the hall towards the big red exit sign. The hospital hadn't released me. Stop, Luke begged, catching up with me, but I forced myself to run faster despite the pain. I wasn't going to just sit in the hospital room and wait to die. Obviously, from what the doctor said, that's what happened to the last one. I was going to get underground. Maybe I would have to stay there forever, or until they found a way to kill these things. I would not leave Grace without a mother. I wanted more than anything to go to her, hug her, to tell her that I loved her. But maybe that thing could follow me even into a basement. I didn't think so, but I couldn't risk it. The best thing that I could do was get underground, buy time. Grace was as safe as she could be with my mom underground. I ran towards the exit. The red sign glowed brightly in the darkness of the hallway. One of the lights flickered overhead. My bare feet slapped against the floor. The floor felt sharp. I kept running, but it didn't seem like I was getting any closer to the exit sign. What the? I glanced back and Luke wasn't following me anymore, nor was Rochelle or Jamie. The hallway extended beyond me, stretching back into the darkness indefinitely. I kept running. The exit door was open now, but still so far away. A stiff breeze blew in, ruffling through my hair. It smelled of pine and wood and decay. Keep running. The ground was so rough under my feet and the air was so cold. The lights above me flickered wildly. The door didn't get any closer, no matter how fast I sprinted. A few leaves swirled by outside in the darkness. Keep running. The lights above me flickered out, and then I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was in the middle of the woods. Pine trees stretched up into the darkness. The sand littered with sharp sticks and rocks bit into the bare soles of my feet. Silence rang in my ears except for a light fluttering sound somewhere in the darkness. No, it tricked me. I wheeled around and I didn't see any lights, any break in the trees. How deep in the barrens am I? How long have I been running? The darkness closed in, suffocating me. I felt my pockets, no phone, no way to call for help, no way to know where I am. I sucked in a breath, ready to scream into the darkness. But that would draw the stickmen to me, wouldn't it? Or did it not matter? Did they already know where I was? I looked up at the stars, at the slices of sky poking through the pines. I tried to identify them. Is that Cassiopeia? But I didn't know anything about how to tell directions from the stars. Besides, the pines blocked out most of the sky anyway. No, wait, that's not the way to do this. I ran in here and my legs didn't feel that sore. Even though it must have distorted time, I had only felt like I was running for a minute. If I had run 10 miles into the barrens, I would have known. I just needed to figure out what direction I had come from. I wheeled around trying to look for footprints, flattened vegetation, any sign of where I had come from. But it was pitch dark out and I didn't have any source of light. There was moonlight enough to see so that I didn't smack into a tree, but not enough to look for footprints in the sand. I stared at the trees, but the branches were up too high and too thin to support my weight. I couldn't climb them to get a better vantage point. I ransacked my pockets again. Nothing. And so I started off in a random direction. Sticks stabbed at my feet. Pebbles rolled underneath my toes. I kept walking forward trying to keep a straight line. The Pine Barrens is 1,000,000 acres, but an acre wasn't that many square miles. I remembered that from somewhere. I tried to focus on doing the math. If I was in the center and I walked in a random direction, how long would it take me to get to the edge? 5 hours or 10, maybe more than that. And of course I had heard the stories. Even without the stickmen, the Pine Barrens were deadly enough. Carnivorous plants, rattlesnakes, and a way of turning people around. It was easy to get lost in the infinite pines. I thought of Grace, Luke telling her that I was gone, her crying and melting down. She needed me. Maybe years ago at that low point in my life right after Grace had been born, I wouldn't have been quite so panicked at the thought of dying. But I was panicking now. I picked up the pace. Sticks stabbed at my feet harder. I tried to keep a straight line, but it was so hard in the dark. And for all I knew, I was just walking deeper and deeper into the barrens. And then I saw it. A clearing. My heart soared. That must be where I came from. It was one of the burned areas. The fire had hollowed out a large clearing. It was lit in silver tones by the nearly full moon, no longer obscured. Some pines still stood, completely bare of needles, skeletal and black. Ash blackened to the pale sand beneath, the color of bone. A few pine saplings poked through the destruction, only inches tall. It was deathly silent. I'm never going to get out of here. I looked up at the blackened pines stretching up to the sky like fingers. Snap. I whirled around. Someone was standing at the edge of the trees, painted in all tones of gray from the moonlight and barely visible among them. I took off into a run, but in my panic I tripped. It felt like I was in slow motion. The sandy, ashy ground rose up to meet me. Pain shot up in my arms and my shoulders screamed in pain. Sticks scraped my cheek. More snapping. I scrambled up to see myself standing there, arms hanging limply at my sides, hair grazing my shoulders. "Let me go!" I screamed. My voice echoed and died into the forest. She stepped closer. I could hear too a wet smacking sound. There was another slimy black appendage attached to her feet, controlling her like she was a puppet. She canted her head at me and her lips split into an unnatural grin. I turned and tried to run again, but an intense wave of dizziness hit me. The ground tilted. Heaviness pressed down on my head. My stomach lurched and I was vomiting, stumbling, tripping in my own puddle of vomit. "Stop," I croaked. I was lying on my back, warm, wet vomit soaking through the back of my shirt. Twisted black appendages were filling up the corners of my vision, melting in with the twisted black pines stretching up to the sky. The stars above me looked like shooting stars moving across the sky with how dizzy I was. The sky was replaced with my own face. Her hair hung onto my face, sticking to the sweat and the vomit. Her lips curled into a smile, and then her mouth began to open, wider, wider, wider. Rows of sharp teeth like a lamprey's descending into the darkness of her throat. I tried to push it off, but my hands met slime. I was pinned by the creature, one of the stickmen. It was only her disembodied head hovering over me, attached to a tangled black mess of a creature. "They eat brains," Jamie's voice echoed in my head as the teeth loomed closer, so close that I couldn't see any of the barons anymore. "Grace, what's she going to do without me? She'll never recover. Her entire life will be ruined. I can't. I'm so sorry." And then I realized the stickmen were attracted to brain signals. What if I had done something that I had never done before? What if I just stopped thinking? I closed my eyes, ignored the warm, rotting breath on my face, ignored the slime seeping through my shirt, ignored thoughts of Grace. I used every last bit of my willpower to stop thinking. Nothing, a void, non-existence. A clicking sound came from above me. The creature began to shift its weight. I continued thinking about nothing, absolutely nothing. The creature pulled itself off of me. When I opened an eye, it no longer wore my head. It was twisting and turning, making clicking sounds, lifting some of its appendages in the air, as if confused, as if it thought I had escaped and it was trying to sense me out again. I lay there in the dark, burnt forest, thinking of nothing for seconds, minutes, hours. It was the hardest thing that I had ever done, pushing away thoughts of Grace, of my future, of hers, pushing it all out and being empty. And when the sun began to rise, I pulled myself up. The burnt forest was bathed in the pink hues of dawn. My skin was covered in vomit and black slime. My shoulders still throbbed with pain, and there was no sign of the stickman. It took me another few hours, but in the daylight, I was able to find my way back. After walking around in circles for a while, I caught a glimpse of a road through the trees. I had apparently fled the hospital and run a half-mile into the pine barrens across the street. Luke and the hospital staff were looking for me all night. I was reunited with Grace, and it was the happiest day of my life. I think that the stickman is still linked to me. We've been spending our nights in the basement where we've been totally safe. Rochelle, Jamie, and I have been working together to figure out how to kill it for good. Some guy online from the incident 10 years ago claims that drowning them works. But for now, I am content to be home and be safe, even if it isn't forever, and a million bad things are waiting to happen. I can't remember the last time that I left the house. I do know that I ran out of my medication a few days ago, but the apathy that I was feeling just kept telling me to stay in, lock the door, and go back to bed. Not like I could afford it anyway, with no insurance to speak of and barely $10 to my name. Heck, the last grocery delivery that I got is barely hanging on, despite my depressed appetite forcing me to ration it. I had about 12 different voicemails from my mom asking why I wasn't responding, begging to know that I was still alive, but I just couldn't. It wasn't worth it because she wouldn't believe me anyway. Hell, I'm surprised she hasn't flown over here yet to drag me out. I can hear her now. "You know that you're better than this, Daniel. Get up." Yeah, great motivation there. It was the voice in my head telling me that I was worthless, that it would be better for me, for everyone, if I just took myself out of the pool. It's not like I contributed much, just a struggling writer who posts horror stories on the internet. Not like it was enough to keep the lights on. Then again, I don't know if anyone would notice if I stopped paying rent in this shithole high-rise, other than the slumlord that already bled me dry like a damned vampire. He didn't even come around anymore, and knew that eviction wasn't worth the trouble. The cops didn't care about things out here, and this guy was already on their shit list. Must not have paid his dues to the police union lately. Loud discordant tones rang from my phone, sitting on the charger beside my bed. I don't even know why I bothered to keep it charged other than doom scrolling anyway. Not like anything was looking up in the world recently. I figured it was just another silver alert, some old dementia patient taking the keys when they shouldn't. My grandpa made it all the way to Mexico like that one time. Unlike his decaying brain though, mine found the idea of being outside terrifying. Just the slightest hint of stepping out of my apartment was dread-inducing, with the insane amount of things that could go wrong at every moment. Hell, just going to the grocery store can get you shot these days. Why risk it? Not the point. Check your phone. The sleep in my eyes wasn't leaving, taking every chance when I tried blinking it away, desperate to put me back under its dreamy spell. My hand darted out, limbs heavy, still not awake, and pulled my phone to my face. It wasn't even dark out, despite the blackout curtains making it look like it was the dead of night. No, the phone read 2:37 p.m., with the alert notification in full right below it. Emergency nationwide alert. All persons. Do not, under any circumstance, look at the sky. Please close all windows, doors, and any other way to view the outside world. Please shelter in place until the alert has been lifted. If you are not in an area to shelter in place, please carefully move to the nearest building with adequate shelter. Repeat, do not look at the sky under any circumstances. If you or someone near you has made this mistake, immediately administer the following emergency procedures. 1. Restrain the exposed. Rigid, stronger bonds are recommended. 2. Do not attempt to reason with the subject. They will tell you that they're unaffected. 3. Terminate the subject through dismemberment or immolation. Use both to be safe. 4. Remain